Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Found Shigaraki and Kurogiri? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. The skies were clear on a brisk sunny morning in a city in Tokyo, full of people with most of them having powers called quirks while some didn't have any. Everyone was busy going on and about with their everyday lives, unaware of the presence of those hiding from them. Alleyways in a big cities, any city actually, were not uncommon as they were usually taken to either use as a shortcut or to sneak around and hide, some for secret meets, but for other cases they were used to hide within the shadows of them, and for some they're hiding from the world to avoid ridicule and rejection, especially if you had something that could be potentially dangerous to others. Such is the case for two young orphan boys, one being Tamura Shigaraki, although supposedly he had a different name but was too young to remember and it was changed to this due his father not wanting his real name being traced back to him, and the other who was slightly older than him by 4 months, Kurogiri Fujiwara. Shigaraki wore only a black long-sleeve shirt, wore blue pants, and had very pale skin that looked kind of sickly and had short pale blue hair and apple-red eyes. Kurogiri wore a white shirt with a tattered brown vest and green hand-me-down pants and had kind of tan but pale still skin with short black hair and luminous yellow eyes. Neither wore shoes and were covered on dirt and scrakes. Both of them were young kids, about the age of kindergarten, 4, going on 5, orphan runaways on the streets, homeless, lost, not to mention hungry and lonely, all because of their quirks. Quirks were supposed to be amazing gifts, but for these two it only seemed to be curses they were born with. For Shigaraki, his quirk was decay. Anything he touches will cripple up, getting weaker until it decays away and leaves nothing but a pillar of ashes and dust within seconds for objects. On humans it's dangerous and can cause them severe pain, even death. It's also dangerous to himself too. But it only works if he has all 5 digits on the object or person in question. If he leaves on finger out, he can touch things without crippling them unintentionally. And as for Kurogiri, his quirk is Warp Gate. He can teleport himself and anyone and items to anywhere, but he needs to know the location in question to work. It can also be used to stop people fighting in some cases. But if he closes the gate while someone is in it, be it whole body or a part of their body, it'll rip them apart. He can also hide his face and true form with his quirk by covering his body, but not his clothes, or his whole form in a black and purple ominous mist. The only thing you can see besides his eyes if you look hard enough and touch is the metal collar around his neck. They were both dumped at the same orphanage by their real parents because they feared them and didn't want them when they were much younger, too young to remember them. But things were not much better there either. They already knew that their quirks could be severely dangerous if they were not careful, as they had accidentally caused a few incidents to happen because of them, damages on the orphanage along with children's toys and clothes, and even hurting some, and even badly purely by accident, to name a few. Even when they practiced to control them, everyone, even the caretakers, feared and loathed them. The two were close and had the other's backs despite their tragic lives, brothers to the other. Nobody would adopt them either, mainly because everyone would either lock them up until adoption day was over, or everyone would recommend the parents not to, and bad rumors were spread around too. Why the people at the orphanage kept them was beyond their minds. Things only got worse as of last night round midnight. The caretakers could not take it anymore. They wanted to get rid of them, put them out of their misery, so they would not have to deal with them anymore. Nobody would care if they were still here or gone, they just wanted them out of their lives. But they had to be sure that no one, not even the heroes, knew about this, or they would be in trouble. The two were young, but they certainly knew what death was. They knew they couldn't stay. Well, it just so happens at that time the duo had been planning on escaping their prison of a so-called home. They were awake at the time when they overheard the caretakers talking about it. Crippling a window to dust, they escaped just as one of the caretakers, the top head of them next to the headmaster, came on with a Walter PPK 100 with a silencer on it, intending to shoot them in the heads to end it quick and painlessly. They escaped with only a graze or 2 on them and ran like there was no tomorrow. No surprise that no one filed a missing persons report to the police by the time morning came. By then they too had already gotten pretty far from the orphanage, so far that they don't know where it was or where they were even. Neither of them had ever been outside of the grounds of that place and were not told where they were other than Karakura Town, so they had no clue what it looked like besides being a 4-story building and where it was, let alone what part of Japan it was in and they were in right now, as they had hitched a few stowaway rides on some buses and trains, too scared and tired to keep track how many, though Kurogiri was pretty sure they were way in the middle of Japan, if not then a little away from the middle of it. They hid in the alley the first chance they got where they could rest, hide, and even cry. Well, first Shigaraki scratched at his neck in frustration and anger with 4 of his fingers, a bad habit of his, for a little while before he broke down into tears with Kurogiri, who tried to stop himself from crying but failed, in private, as people were starting to appear on the streets going about with their lives. Neither knew how long they were there nor how long they've been crying for, but neither cared as all of what they faced came hurtling at them with full force. It's sniffle star. It's not fair. Shigaraki started as he sobbed. Why us? Sob, what did we, sniffle, do to deserve this? But why were we born? Sniffle, with these curses? We just want. Sob, want to have a family. Sniffle, is that hard to ask? Kurogiri cried as he desperately tried to fruitlessly wipe the never-ending tears away. Were we mistakes? We. Sniffle, we never asked for. Sob, this? Shigaraki cried to no one. Why can't they see that, sob? We just sniffle star. Kurogiri exclaimed as he fell on his knees next to his brother, who sat with his back against the wall. Why won't the pain end? Why were we born? They both continued to cry their hearts out, the crushing feeling of being lost, homeless, unwanted, unloved, forgottenness and pain on various levels hitting them hard. They cried as no one heard them nor their wailing, or so they believed. A soft light pair of footfalls coming close to them fell on the deaf ears of the 2 boys, who were practically drowning in their misery as they believed that they were doomed to be ridiculed and hated for the rest of their lives. That was until the voice of a young boy was heard as they perked up in surprise. Are you 2 okay? They both lifted their heads when they heard that, the source of it coming from a little boy around their age, judging by his voice and appearance. He wore an orange shirt, green shorts, white socks and red and white tennis shoes. His skin was a pale, but heathly unlike the 2 boys. Tan with dark green short hair that was kinda messy and curly, and his eyes were the color of emeralds. On his face was a look that they were not used to seeing, but at the same time confused and surprised them. A look of concern and worry, especially after seeing they were scratched up and even had some bullet grazes on them, 2 on the black-haired boy with 1 on his left cheek and 1 on his left arm, and the blue-haired had 3 with 1 on his left thigh, 1 under his chin on the right side and 1 on his left wrist. The grazes had already long since stopped bleeding and dried up, but still they may, if they haven't already started to, get infected if they were not treated soon. Everything else was just minor. You're both hurt, the green-haired boy exclaimed. You 2 need to get to a hospital right now. When he said that, the 2 had stiffed up, faces showed fear and apprehensiveness as the green boy saw, leaving him confused though his expression didn't change. Was this something I said? He wondered. There was no way the 2 could go to the hospital, any hospital for that matter. They would be asked about where they came from and how they got into this mess, and chances were the people at their old so-called home would deny any accusations thrown at them, and they would be forced to go back there and suffer even more, or be sent to another orphanage or foster home where things might get worse for them. You can't. Shigaraki protested, fear in his voice. We can't go. Just go away. I won't, the stranger protested himself. You 2 need help, and you guys shouldn't be here all by yourselves. Someone could hurt you both. We're already hurt, Shigaraki countered, visibly shaking as he held himself, with both of his pinkies sticking out as to not hurt himself, turning away from him. We don't need anyone's help, we're fine on our own, just go away. But why? Why won't you go seek help? The green boy pointed out. It's not that we don't want to, Kurogiri answered, trying to calm his now shaking brother. We just can't. But why? The stranger asked again, wanting to understand. It's none of your business. Shigaraki barked out in anger. Tamura Kurogiri scolded but was cut off as his brother continues. We're nothing but walking curses that no one wants. It was made clear by our ex-parents and those who were supposed to take care of us that we would only bring everyone misery. Besides, we're dangerous. But why? The stranger asked again, his concern growing deeper at this. But neither of the boys answered, which confused the green-haired boy until the blue-haired boy turned back around, though his head was still case down, and proceeded to grab a large discarded, empty soda can. What he saw surprised him. It turned gray as ash until it crippled into nothing as it dust particles some to vanish into nothingness as well. Then the black-haired boy allowed his quirk to show. His body except his clothes turned into a black and purple mist covering his true form. The metal collar round his neck was visible and his eyes showing but took on a somewhat misty appearance too and made his yellow eyes eerie. Then he turned his whole form into a misty mass where you would think that he had no physical form. Then the blue-haired boy stuck his hand through the black mass and a small mass of the stuff appeared next to the green-haired boy as he saw the boy's hand come through it in front of him before he retracted it, and the other boy stayed like this for a while before he returned to his real form. I believe that's enough of a demonstration, Kurogiri said before he cased his head back down. Go ahead, run. Shigaraki dared him as he turned his face away from him again, not wanting this boy to see his and Kurogiri's weakness. Sneer. Yell, everyone's been doing that since they hate our quirks after seeing that they are curses? Who wouldn't hate something that can only hurt someone? This was more directed at himself than both him and Kurogiri, because his quirk working directly on full contact, he could turn things to dust instantly, in some cases almost instantly depending on the size of the object, and hurt people to a serious degree. Some people hated him more than Kurogiri. Right now he was expecting the boy to turn away and run, start throwing rocks at them, yell bad things at them, get the police, any of those things to name a few on the top of his head as they've been through these scenarios before. But what he said was completely unexpected, in fact shocking. I don't hate them. I think they're cool. Disbelief shook the two boys as they turned back to the third boy, eyes widen in shock, confused, and were left without words. The green-haired has a look of awe and excitement with a big smile plastering his face, something the two were not used to see and couldn't believe they were see. Is this real? Did he really just say that? The two boys thought in unison. They pinched themselves already, they were still there. WW-. What? Kurogiri was the first to say in a stuttering whisper. The green-haired boy nodded as he continued, I mean it. They're cool. Really cool. I mean, yeah, in the wrong hands they could be as dangerous as you say, but in the right hands they can be used for good. With those quirks they can be really helpful. Like if you were to take out a hug garbage bag that's too heavy for you to carry a long way, you could either make a portal that leads to the garbage, can making the trip easier, or you can disintegrate the trash until it's nothing but a small pile of dust that's easier to clean up. And if you're going to be late to go somewhere, you can transport there with time to spare. And if you're trapped somewhere with no way out, you can make your own exit with either of those quirks. And if you need to reach something but it's too far, you can open a portal and reach with no problem. If you rake leaves in a pile and need to throw them away, you can turn it to dust and either let the wind carry it away or sweep it up just fine. The boy just kept going on and on, gushing about how helpful their quirks would be, and how amazing they were, for what seemed like hours. Neither could think of what to say or do about this. Both seemed to be frozen in place as the boy took a few steps closer, but cautiously as to not frighten them, but made sure he was not too close to them to make them uncomfortable. Neither of them minded as they were too busy in their own thoughts. This had to be a joke, right? He couldn't mean what he was saying, could he? Still, why was he still here? Why did his voice sound genuine? Excited instead of scared? The more he talked, smiled, and seemed to have a friendly atmosphere around them, to their own surprise, the less scared and upset they were. Negativity seemed to slip slowly away from them. But what he said next shocked them more than ever. With enough training, with quirks like yours, you too could be heroes. Their eyes widened in shock as they gasped soft but sharply at this. Did he really just say that? The two thought as they looked at each in disbelief before they turned back to the boy. Did he really just say that we could become heroes? Nobody, and I mean nobody, ever said anything like that to them, ever. All their lives they were only told that their quirks would be something that villains would have and feared that they would. Even though the two boys never wanted to be villains, they wanted to use their quirks for good things but were never given the chance nor told that they could. This boy, they felt something starting to break from inside them, but not in a bad way. Instead, however, it felt like something lifting something off their shoulders, something started to flow within them, something building up until it would burst out of them. They didn't know what I was though. Do you mean that? Kurogiri asked him in overwhelming shock. You're joking, right? Shigaraki asked, a part of him in shock, a part of him hopeful, and a part of him trying to tell himself that this boy was just messing with them, that he didn't mean it, that he was trying to hurt them like everyone else had. But the boy showed it on his face, how serious he was. His sincerity never ceased, nothing of deception nor spite was present as he said this. Absolutely, and I'm not joking. The boy then took a few steps closer to the two, seeing that they didn't flinch back at this and only gawk at what he said. Their eyes seemed moist on the surface. He took it as a sign that they won't yell at him or run and weren't as fearful as they were earlier. Looking at them more closely, he could see that they were really war for wear. Their current state just screamed exhaustion, pain on more than just the physical level, and the look in their eyes almost seemed to be pleading for help, desperate to find hope in their situation. I may not know what you two have been through, or what kind of pain you've been carrying on yourself, the strange boy started, showing some sadness, sympathy, to their ever-growing shock, towards them, and I may not understand why nobody would at least give you two a chance, lend a helping hand even, but here's one thing I do know, you two did nothing to deserve any of this pain. The two orphan boys just stared at him, a little startled by his outburst, not sure what to say as their doubts started to fade even though they still could not believe what they were hearing. The boy continues as he got serious, some tears started to form but none fell at all. Just because you two have quirks that are very powerful and may seem dangerous, it does not mean that they are dangerous because I can see that neither of you want to use your quirks to hurt people, you don't want to hurt anyone, right? Without realizing it, the two, who had same tears building up in their eyes but didn't seem to know that, whispered almost inaudibly with their voices almost choked up. Wabias. The boy continues, you two have been judged unfairly, neither of you chose your quirks, but they are yours, no one else's, you want to use them for good, not evil. You're not monsters, you're kids like me, you need help. If those people who hurt you both can't see that, if no one else will, then that's their problem, not yours. You both deserve better than this. You need help, you deserve to be happy, not miserable and abandoned and treated so unfairly. They continue to feel something break inside them as tears threaten to burst out at any second, their breathing becoming swallow, having a hard time denying that this was a dream they were having as Shigaraki's guard as well as his hands fell to his sides while Kurogiri fell on his knees, neither able to take their eyes off of this boy. This boy kept saying so many things that neither of them ever heard anyone told them, and secretly hoped, desired, to hear for so long, he just kept breaking through their barriers they put up in their hearts as the last one was close to crumbling. The boy knelt down to meet them both at eye level, offering them a smile filled with warmth, kindness and sympathy. The fire in his eyes never ceased their shining glow as his emerald green eyes met ruby red and topaz yellow eyes. I want to be a hero like All Might, like him I want to help people and smile to show them that things will be okay, like right now. He told them before he slowly offered his hand to them, I want to help you guys, help you to live better lives than this, help you so you can show everyone that you're here to help them, that your quirks are something not be feared and can be helpful, that you will not hurt them, together we can show them that and prove how wrong those people were who hurt you too, that you can become heroes. What do you say? Tears finally fell as that final dam within them had bursted, though silently, as new-found hope shined in their eyes, neither them could hold it back any longer as they launched themselves at him, wrapping their arms around chest, Kurogiri, and neck, Shigaraki with two of his fingers up on each hand so he didn't hurt him by accident, hugging him, clinging unto him like their lives depended on it as they both cried out, letting out all their sorrow, pain, anguish, frustration, anger, loneliness, despair, frustration, fear, misery, heartbreak and doubt that they kept pent up inside them for so long, just letting it all out as the boy, who was startled by this reactions but then relaxed after a moment, returned the hug as he held them close, closing his eyes as his smile continued to show, as the three sat there in their hug with no one to disturb them. The boy allowed them to cry it all out, knowing that they need this and that if he was All Might he'd do the very same thing for those who were in the situation that these boys were in. Though he was able to get through to them, he somehow knew that they would need time to mend their wounds, not just physically mind you, and to help them overcome the challenges that await them ahead, but he was going to help them no matter what. They needed a home first and foremost, a real home, and he knew just the place. Here we are, the green-haired boy announced as the three boys stood in front of the door of his house in a complex apartment. After the boys had finally stopped crying and let out the pain they had kept inside, after telling him their names, the boy who had revealed his name to be Izuku Midoriya insisted that the two boys could stay with him and his mother, as it would be the best option since the two will obviously refuse to go to an orphanage and the boys' house would be better than sleeping on the streets. After a moment of hesitation, they accepted. Kurogiri offers to transport them all to his house, or at least as close as possible, as he had explained that his quirk only works if he knew the location of where to transport to, whether in the area or somewhere out of his line of sight. Thankfully for them, when Izuku told him his address, the Warp Gate child remembered passing the area of his home. Even though it was vague, it was good enough for them. Traveling via Warp Gate made the trip shorter and helped to avoid people staring at them. Thankfully, they didn't run into anyone either on their way up to Izuku's house. Taking the key from under the doormat, Izuku unlocked the door before entering with the two boys. After putting the key back under the doormat, "I'm home," Izuku called out to his mom after closing the door behind him. "And I brought some new friends over, they need help." Just as Inko Midoriya, Izuku's mom, came to greet her son and his new friends, upon seeing the state of the two boys her son brought home, her smile instantly fell as a deep look of shock and worry plastered her face as she rushed over to the trio, startling all but Izuku as Inko knelt down to meet them at eye level. "Are you both okay? Does anything hurt? Who did this to you both?" And such questions she asked them in deep concern. Neither of them were prepared for this nor knew how to answer her, as Shigaraki and Kurogiri never had experience talking to an adult, let alone a stranger. That meant them no harm since they only came across ones that were cruel to them. Coming across a kind-hearted person seemed non-existent until they met Izuku. Both were shaking a bit, neither able to say anything as they saw the clear resemblance between Izuku and this woman who was his mother, though she didn't have Izuku's freckles. They could not help but be jumpy as the worrying adult was checking on their bodice to see if there were other injuries on them that were not visible because of their clothes. Aside from being pretty filthy and having some scratches, bruises and grazes, they were okay. "Both of you come with me," she told them as she soon stood back up and took their hands, leading them to the living room as they stumbled, still in shock and not sure how to react, as Inko then told her son, "Izuku, please grab the first aid kit from the bathroom along with a bowl of hot water and a cloth and bring them to the living room." "Right?" her son replied as he went to get the items requested. As they were led into the living room, the two orphan boys looked around them. It was a nice one, simple but had an unfamiliar homely touch to it. There was a couch, armchair, coffee table, a nice big screen TV on a big dresser, a nice houseplant, a simple kitchen table, several pictures on frames hanging on the walls, and there was even a see-through sliding glass door that led to a decent-sized balcony which had a small table, two chairs and a small but good-sized clothing line pole. The two were uneased but in awe, as they've never been in a place like this, though that was understandable for them. Inko could tell that they unsure but in awe, as if they were not used to seeing a place like this. Judging by their reaction earlier and the way they looked now, she could only assume that they had had a very hard time for who knows how long. And while she doesn't know their story, she could see that they really need help. Leading them to the couch, she had the boys sit on it, told them gently, just as Izuku came in with the items that his mother told him to get. Inko began working on the boys' bumps, bruises and cuts, cleaning not only the cuts, scratches and grazes but also the dirt they had on their faces with the washcloth and hot water. For the boys, to their surprise, though they were too shocked about all of this to begin with to even think about trying to move away from this woman's gentle touch as she cleaned and patched them up. While the damp cloth when it touched their cuts stung for a bit, the warmth from it was nice, pleasant, comforting, even as they, one at a time, leaned into it and sigh in bliss without really acknowledging their actions at that moment, as they were too focused on the warmth they were receiving from this. Why this felt so nice. Why they didn't push her way while they had the chance. Why she was fretting over them like this, well, them in general? And more questions popped up in their heads as this continued. After a while Inko had done her job as she was satisfied with her work seeing boys' faces not only clean but also seeing them patched up good as new. There, good as new, Inko chimed before she asked them, gently, does anywhere else hurt? Do you both feel better? This startled them out of their train of thought as they were trying to fathom all of this. And no ma'am. We're fine now thanks to we. Kurogiri replied nervously as he rubbed his now bandaged arm, blushing slightly. Shigaraki nodded in agreement, fast but awkwardly. Inko nodded, you're welcome. Now then, is anyone hungry? At that moment the boys' stomachs growled very loudly, causing the both of them to blush pretty hard. Inko giggled at this while Izuku smiled with her at this response. Never had they thought that they would ever have a real meal like this, not just given bread, water, fruit on an occasion, but a real meal, one that tastes more delicious than what they were used to eating. It was a simple lunch to most people, rice, beef stew, fresh cheese bread, and salad. But to them it was a feast fit for kings. Sighs of satisfaction and relief came out of them, smiling as Shigaraki and Kurogiri rubbed their stomachs in bliss as they finished their meals. Inko smiled at this along with Izuku, happy to see them smiling for once with full stomachs. Albeit they were hesitant at first to take a bite at first, staring at their food as if it were poisoned, even seemed a little fidgety in their seats. But once Izuku showed them that it was safe to eat they took a bite, which made their eyes lit up like stars before they dug right in a quick pace, at some point choked on their food a bit before being pat on the back by Inko and giving them tall glasses of apple juice to help, telling them gently to eat slower so to avoid that and savor the flavor and taste of it. Inko could tell there was more to these boys than she knows more than what she's seen, who had introduced themselves to her and she did the same, judging by the way they were eating a little bit ago, how they were acting, and at some point they even had tears in their eyes, though none fell and they hid them when they ducked their heads and wiped their tears away. She wasn't a detective like Sherlock Holmes, but she did have a keen eye for detail. Whether this was from learning from reading detective stories lately or a motherly intuition at play, she believes it's mainly the latter. She wanted to ask them about what they'd been through, but she chose not to, at least not right away. She wanted the boys to know that they were safe and they could trust them before she asked and make calls about this. She was pretty sure of one thing. These poor boys must be victims of child abuse, which was a very delicate subject, hence why she didn't ask them right away. She had a feeling that Izuku was going to tell her how she found them, but whether he forgot at the moment but would remember to tell her later or he wanted to wait until things died down a bit. She guessed it was the former. Izuku is bright in some aspects but he is still a kid after all. I'm glad you two enjoyed the lunch I made, Inko said. You two must have been starving. You have no idea, Mrs. Midoriya, Kurogiri said with a sigh. I can't remember the last time I had a meal this good and filling, Shigaraki said, though it was more of a quiet whisper that was barely audible, though Inko heard him. While Inko kept a smile on her face on the outside, on the inside however she mentally frowned at that. She only just met them not too long ago but already she could tell that they've been through a lot, too much for two 4-year-old boys to experience. Again she didn't know their story, but she will keep observing and help the boys for now until the time would be right to ask them. As for Izuku, he saw the look in his mom's eyes, sympathy, sadness, like she wanted to ask them something, but chose not to, or at least not now. Why that was? He didn't know. So, what do you boys like to do for fun? Inko suddenly asked their two young guests, not wanting to seem like something was off. The boys were not expecting to be asked that question since no one had ever asked them what they liked to do for fun nor anything they liked personally for that matter. To them it seemed foreign, though didn't want to seem awkward to their hostess than they already had, so one of them, Shigaraki, replied after thinking for a bit on what to say until it hit him. We like to play hide and seek from time to time. That was only half the truth. The boys did like to play that game with each other, though it seemed kinda stale since it was only just the two of them that would play it, not like they had a choice there. Most of the time however it was spent as training trying to hide from their so-called caretakers when they did something that got them angry, or to hide from the other kids who want to pelt them with rocks or something that would do harm to them to make them miserable, or both, especially. On Mondays, not everyone enjoys Mondays. When he said that, that was when Izuku smiled as he chimed in, previous thoughts set at the back of his mind until later. Mom, can Kurogiri, Tamura and I play hide and seek? Izuku asked his mother, practically bouncing in his seat. Of course. Inko nodded, thinking it would be a great idea. Tamura, Kurogiri, would you like that? To play hide and seek with my son? This took the boys by surprise. Is there anything that won't take them by surprise today? Especially that they said his first name. Nobody wanted to play with them back at the orphanage, nobody, because they were either scared of them or hated them or both, because of their quirks and what incidents they had caused by accident that was costly and brought terror in the house, and money was strapped when some of the more expensive things that needed to be replaced got destroyed, or if someone got hurt and needed a doctor by their quirks, again, not intentionally. What surprised them the most was that Izuku was the first to call Shigaraki by his first name, instead of his last name. While everyone at the orphanage called his brother by his first name, they called him by his last name, so much so that he was not used to being called by his first at all, even when only Kurogiri was the only one who called him by his first name. When everyone said either of his names, they said it with spite and resentment, fear and hatred especially. Same with Kurogiri, though they were more spiteful towards Shigaraki. But when Izuku and his mom said it, there was none of that. Instead there was affection, kindness, gentleness. 3 things they weren't used to. When they said them like that, it didn't make them flinch for once, instead it felt wanted, like they would never be turned away. Sure, Kurogiri stuttered again, we would love to play, alright Tamura? Oh of course. Shigaraki said, nodding quickly, trying to hide his blush. XXX, gonna call Shigaraki by his first name from here on out. What a day, was all the two could think of as the 2 boys laid in the sleeping bags that Inko gave them to use as they were in Izuku's room, as Izuku insisted on them staying with him for the night. The rest of the day was full of surprises, unexpected but pleasant, even happy ones thankfully, for the boys. They were actually able to play hide and seek with another person, and for once it was more fun to play it than they could recall. Izuku was great at finding them, even better at hiding, so great that the 2 gave up after what seemed like hours trying to find him until he sprang at them yelling "Booch" to surprise them. He meant no harm from that because he was laughing happily and said it was a harmless prank, as he explained, and said he had fun with them and they were fun to play with, and that surprises like that were for fun, and the 2 took a few moments to process this and realize this before they could not help but laugh as well with him, as it seemed to be contagious. And it only grew when Izuku told them some hilarious jokes that made them fall to their knees. Neither of them could remember the last time they ever actually laughed like this, nor had fun playing with somebody else. After that, Izuku brought them over to the TV to watch the new All Might movie. The boys knew that there were heroes and what a TV was, but they didn't know who All Might was, though they heard his name once or twice from the other children and the adults at the orphanage, and they've never watched TV before. They told him that. Mostly they were kept in a room, with nothing but an old mattress and a dress to keep what little things they had, which they lost when they escaped from there. No one came in to help them nor play with them, only just to bring them food that was less than decent or to yell and scorn them, hurt them even. Mainly this was from the adults. They dare not tell him this though. Nor of the fact that while they've heard of some heroes here and there, they were unaware of where these heroes were stationed, most likely by the workers at the orphanage to keep the boys from finding them and getting the cops to arrest the people at there for child abuse and neglectance. They remember their conversation with Izuku. You don't know who All Might is? Izuku in confusion, a bit of shock. Izuku honestly never thought that there could people out there who didn't know who he was. No, well not exactly, Kurogiri explained. We've heard his name here and there, but one would tell us who he was. How come? Izuku asked. Well, with our quirks, we weren't company that someone wanted to be around. Kurogiri explained, hesitantly and only saying the main point of their case. Izuku knew that they were in a really bad spot. He didn't know what it was and he wanted to ask them, but chose not to. He had asked them on their way to his house in the apartment complex, but the 2 boys looked very uncomfortable about it. Kurogiri said that they didn't want to talk about it right now as it was a sensitive subject for them. Izuku could see that and he understood. It bothered him a bit that they would not tell him there, as he hoped he would help them more, but he knew to respect someone's personal space. His mother raised him to be polite and respectful to others, so he let it go for now. So he instead smiled and said, well, today you're gonna learn all about him. Come on. He told them as he dragged them over to the TV just as the movie was about to begin. To say they were amazed and awestruck would be an understatement for Tamura and Kurogiri. This hero, All Might, was strong, fast, heroic, kind, selfless, and always risked his life to save people with a bright, assuring, and fearless smile. Izuku explained that he is the #1 hero, the symbol of peace, the best of the best in all of Japan, in the whole world really. He told them of all the great things he's done, even showing them, with his mom's help and supervision, a video on the computer of when All Might made his first grand debut that was recorded years ago. It was thanks to Izuku that they were hooked on him. He even showed them the hero merchandise, mainly of All Might, he had, and played with some of his action figures. It took a bit of convincing though, since the boys have never actually played with toys before. Though Tamura was hesitant as he didn't want to accidentally destroy his belongings because of his quirk. When he told him this, it got Izuku thinking for a bit before he asked him if there were some details to his quirk after he told him and his brother that he liked to analyze people's quirks, heroes especially, and people who had amazing quirks in general, taking notes on their strengths and tactics and drawbacks on their quirks. While this surprised them both as he was only, quite literally, the same age as them, though he seemed to act like he was older than he looked in that regard, neither saw any harm in telling him. First Tamura, then Kurogiri, as Izuku wrote it down in his notebook, putting as much carefully details as possible and make his writing not seem childish. His mom did have him take some writing classes to improve his handwriting, which paid off. Showing him a bit more demonstrations with their quirks, Tamura disintegrating things that were of no use like a crippled up piece of paper, a broken dish, and a broken pen. Interesting fact, Tamura's quirk only works on solid things. Anything liquid-based like water, for example, will render his quirk useless if he can't grasp something solid. And Kurogiri can even turn his whole body into the black mist that comes from his quirk, making him not only more ominous, and this makes him fast and levitate off the ground for a while, but also harder to be ensnared by his enemies, and transform back afterwards. He then seemed to be in deep thought before his face brightened up as if an idea hit him. Excusing himself for a minute, he left the room, leaving the boys confused for a few moments until Izuku came back with a pair of thick gray cotton gloves and a pair of scissors, small safety scissors, with a smile on his face. At first the two were more confused about why he brought those things and used the scissors to cut only the whole sleeves for the pink and ring finger of each glove, but then he told them as he was finished, putting the scissors down. When you told me about your quirk, Tamura, it got me thinking. Does your quirk work on things that's the same surface, or does it work on all of them? That made him more confused, not exactly sure what him meant by that as he tilted his head a bit. What does he mean? He wondered to himself. Like if it had something that was wood and something made of plastic or clothes, if you were to put one hand on them as they lay side by side at the same time, would it still work? Izuku continued. When he said that, it was as if a ton of bricks had hit him as his eyes widened. Come to think of it, had he ever actually thought of doing that with his quirk? As far as memories serve, he only touched and disintegrated things that were not two or more different surfaces, just the same, like a whole fridge or something. Had he ever actually tried to experiment more on how his quirk worked than what he had discovered? Wasn't sure. He never gave it a shot since was more focused on trying to survive the ill conditions of the accommodations he and Kurogiri were forced to live in at the orphanage. Back when they were trying to not cause anyone any trouble than what they already did unintentionally and by accident. Could he actually give it a try now that he wasn't there and dealing with that anymore? I haven't actually thought about that. Tamura told him truthfully, though nervously. Well, we won't know unless we try, right? Kurogiri asked hopefully, as it had hit him too that he never thought about that either. Right? Izuku chimed before he handed him the gloves. His smile seemed to not end with assurance. So let's test it out and see. What do you say? Tamura looked at him before he looked at the gloves in his hand, as if contemplating on whether he should try or not. He was hesitant as he feared that it wouldn't work. His quirk was too dangerous. How could one tame a quirk like this? Sure, he had practice on not using his whole hand on something or someone lest he caused severe harm, but even then it was still feared by everyone and it was not enough to make him less dangerous. In his mind he wondered what should he do. But then his mind trailed back to the film he and others were watching earlier as he then remembered what All Might said at one point of the movie when he was talking his sidekick, one of them anyways, Sir Night Eye. It's risky, yes, and like you said it may not work, But how will you know that it won't work if you don't give it a try? How will you know that you will fail or succeed if you don't take the risk? That was when it hit him. If he didn't give it a try, how will he know that it will work or not? How will he know that his quirk can be tamed if he didn't take the risk? Well, Tamura thought to himself after he thought a little more about this, if All Might is willing to take the risk, then so should I. With a nod, Tamura gingerly accepted the gloves from Izuku, only using his thumb, index and middle to grab them and carefully putting the first one on, as he quickly discovered and was surprised that the inside of the gloves were not cotton but of a different material entirely that he didn't recognize as he slipped his pinky and ring finger through first, which came out through their respective holes, before he slowly slipped the rest of his fingers into the glove as he closed his eyes. Immediately with a flinch, waiting for the inevitable to happen. But nothing happened. A few more seconds went by and still nothing happened. Tamura didn't feel the glove decay away as he slowly opened his eyes, though reluctantly, as saw it as clear as day. As his eyes widened in shock, shocked beyond shocked as he didn't realize that his jaw had dropped as his gloved hand was shaking. The glove didn't turn to dust, nor did it look like it was rotting away at the literal seams. It remained intact. I didn't destroy it, it's still here. Tamura thought in disbelief, not even realizing that tears welled up in his eyes. Could this be true? I'm not dreaming, right? Seeing this made Izuku chuckled as his theory was correct, while for Kurogiri he was just as shocked as his brother, but then relief washed it away as he smiled, close to letting his tears burst out at this. Looking at the other glove, he carefully put it on his other hand the same way as the first one, and it too did not rot away. Looking down at his now mostly gloved and shaking hands, his mind was still trying to process this, couldn't believe that this was happening. Immediately Tamura pinched himself on the arm. It stung. It hurt. He was still here. This wasn't a dream. This is real, Tamura thought to himself. Slowly but hesitantly he closed his hands into complete fists for the first time, gripping them before releasing them. Again nothing happened, gloves were still present and he was unharmed. This is real. Tamura thought that again as his whole being began to shake. Soon he felt something run down his cheeks as he realized that it was his tears as they blurry his vision, but he didn't stop them nor could he hold back as it felt like another dam inside of him had bursted as he brought his hands up to his face. One covered his right eye, entirely now that there was no fear of harming himself accidentally, and the other trying to fruitlessly wipe away the unending tears from his left as he broke down yet again that day as he cried. At first this concerned Izuku until Kurogiri, who knew exactly what was going through his brother's head, explained to him that Tamura was not crying in sadness, but with pure relief and joy at the fact that because of him, the blue-haired boy now had a way to not only not accidentally cause destruction and harm to people with his quirk, but to also do things normally without having to keep some of his fingers up because of his destructive quirk. That there was hope to control his quirk more sufficiently. And it was thanks to Izuku that he, Kurogiri himself, would not have to suffer watching his brother suffer like had in the past for so long nor feel helpless to help him anymore, and that his brother Tamura no longer had to bear such a burden he had been carrying for so long. This pain and anguish, anger and fear could finally been washed away by his, Izuku's, act of kindness. No, another act of kindness by him. At this both of the orphan boys thanked him immensely. They didn't feel like that had deserved this, but they were grateful to him and were touched once again by his loving heart. This made Izuku happy. Happy that he could help them again. Sure, he still didn't know what their situation was, and chances are that he may not understand why they were forced to suffer besides for their quirks, but still if he was able to help them, if he could smile and tell them things will be okay just like his hero would, then he was happy. For the second time that day they were in a group hug as Izuku once again lent his shoulders for his guests to cry on. After what seemed like another 4 hours or so, the crying eventually ceased and the boys could now resume with their playtime with no hesitation. After a while Inko came in to check on they and asked Tamura and Kurogiri if they wanted to spend a few days with them. This made Izuku ecstatic as he was jumping up and down with glee. While this confused the boys about her offering to them who were strangers to her to remain in her house so suddenly, but if it meant that they would not have to sleep in the streets anymore nor go back to the orphanage, then they would not complain. Then Inko drew them a nice hot bath for them. Their tub was big enough for all three of the boys to take a bath together. Even offering to wash their clothes and lend them some of her son's clothes, which he didn't mind at all. Tamura already had practice before getting the gloves on how to avoid activating his quirk, so grabbing the soap and shampoo and conditioner in the tub would not be a problem. In the tub they were able to clean each other off, without clothes nor bandages in the way. Izuku continued to talk to them while they listened, about himself, what school he went to and what he learned there. They were more interested in that since they never went to school, they had to teach themselves back at the prison of a home, and about his friend Katsuki Bakugo who had recently gotten his quirk a few days ago. Then somewhere during their bath time they got into a splash fight as they all laughed, having fun that seemed to be just as contagious as laughter. Tamura and Kurogiri could not remember for the life of them when they ever had a bath like this, let alone a proper one or one at all most of the time, nor of when they ever actually had fun during bath time, nor the last time they felt so clean like this. They were in bliss once again. The rest of the day went on without a hitch. The boy played, had dinner and then went to bed. All except Izuku, who had to change his shirt because he got it wet from helping his mom put the dishes into the dishwasher and go to the bathroom. It's still hard to believe that all that happened today really, well, happened. Kurogiri commented, turning to his brother, to think we went from having the worst day of our lives to having the best one ever. Yeah, Tamura agreed, turning to him, although a part of me still thinks this all just a dream, but it isn't. I've been pinching myself all day and still I find us both here. This is surreal. But I'm not complaining, he said with a sigh. A single tear welled up in his right eye as he smiled as he looked down at his gloves that were partially fingerless on his hands. I can't even remember the last time I felt so safe and happy. Izuku and his mom are so wonderful. If only we can stay here forever. Same here, Kurogiri agreed. It was then Izuku came in wearing a white pajama top with black pajama bottoms, closing the door behind him as their conversation stopped. Ready for bed? Izuku asked them. Yes. The orphan boys chimed. Tamura hid his tear as Izuku turned off the light. Getting into bed, Izuku told them, I don't have school for a while due to all the staff being sick, so we'll have plenty of time to play, and tomorrow we're going to the park. There I can introduce you guys to Kaken. Won't that be fun? Yeah. Both of them cheered. We've never been to the park before, Kurogiri told him, so this will be new to us, but exciting as well. Tamura concluded. Great, Izuku chimed. So the boys started to yawn, knowing it was time for bed. As they all go comfortable, Tamura then said to Izuku. Izuku? Yeah? The green-haired boy asked. Thank you for everything. Same here, Kurogiri said with a nod. Izuku nodded back, his smile full of joy at being thanked for helping someone. You're welcome. The boys said their good nights as they all soon went to slumberland. Triplets. Inko had just hung up on the phone as she sighed. Her friend that owed her a favor will hopefully find something. Those poor boys, she whispered sadly. All day she had been observing the boys from afar, making sure to take every little note down before she were to make the call, not the one she did just finished moments ago, observing their reactions, what they said and how they interacted with. Well, pretty much everything around them. Even though she didn't show it to the boys, when she saw their injuries, scars and how clearly starved they were by how their ribs were kinda of but visibly still showing through their skin, she was sickened and horrified. And it only worsened along with her sadness when her son told her how he found them and what he heard from them when she spoke with him a little while ago after her son got changed, and what she heard the boys say all day and from beside the bedroom door before her son went in. If none of this screamed being deprived of joy, nourishment and love, if this didn't scream that they were victims of child abuse, she didn't know what would. Well, she was going to help them, do whatever she can to give them a better life even if she had to fight for them, which she will. Hopefully she can get them to talk to her about their situation in the next day or so. All she could do was wait and hope. As soon as they got to the park, after getting permission to come here by themselves, with a promise, for the 40th time that day, that they will be careful and come home before it gets dark or if something occurs, which was close to where the Midoriyas lived. Needless to say, it looked simple but pretty spacious. There were some swing sets, some trees here and there to lay under in the shade or to climb on, a jungle gym, a large sandbox, some water fountains, a slide, seesaw, and the rest of the place looked clear with nothing around, most likely for when kids played sports like kickball, catching soccer? Kurogiri theorized. There were a few kids playing here and there, but not too many, as most were probably at their respective preschools. Here we are. Izuku, who wore a green shirt, black shorts and signature red shoes, said to the boys, "This is where Kakin and I play sometimes. He should be here any minute." The park may seem like there was not much to offer, but a park is a park, all things considered. "What do you and him like to do here?" Kurogiri asked him as he wore a purple sweatshirt, gray pants and black sandals. "As of late we like to play soccer, though I can't seem to nail hitting the ball with my head without falling down yet," Izuku said, rubbing the back of his head with an exasperated but small smile. "Well, no one said it would be easy," Kurogiri pointed out. "True," Izuku replied. "Izuku?" Tamura asked him as he wore a red button-up shirt, light blue shorts and red running shoes like Izuku, still trying to get used to calling him by his first name, wearing the gloves he had on yesterday, his face far less full of dread and more youthful and healthier than he was yesterday. "You said that you and Kakin are friends, right? Does that mean he likes All Might too?" "You got that right," Izuku exclaimed in excitement. "Just like me, he wants to be like All Might." "Deku," called the voice that Izuku knew all too well. He turned to the direction of the voice, not noticing the other two boys were confused and a bit concerned. Both of the boys had been called a lot of bad things. Deku was one of them, though not used often, as they were called things worse than that. They knew that Deku means can't do it or can't do anything. As they saw a boy run up to them, who had to be Kakin, or Katsuki Bakugo as Mrs. Midoriya had told them, as Kakin was a nickname that only Izuku called him as, who wore black t-shirt with the kanji Fort Brave at the front of it, tan shorts and green running shoes, who had pale tan skin, but more healthy than Tamura's, platinum blonde yellow hair and red-orange eyes. The two boys wondered why he called Izuku, who didn't seem bothered by it, such a name that was degrading, a name that was an insult. What went on the rest of the day was a mix of emotions for the two orphan boys: joy, frustration, concern, respect, a sense of protectiveness for Izuku. All of that combined was kinda overwhelming. But, you may ask? Allow me to elaborate on it. Joy. The boys now had another person to play with. Though the way he acts is questionable to them, he was still fun to be around. He had an awesome quirk, as Izuku said. And to their relief and surprise, when the boys explained to him what their quirks were and Izuku explained how they can be used to help people, while Katsuki said that his was better and cooler than theirs, he said that their quirks were neat and could be useful if they were shooting to be rescue heroes or sidekicks to them, which he was leaning heavily on, not really believing that they could go pro. Frustration. Despite the compliments, he still spoke like he was putting them down to make himself feel big, which they could tell that he was. He called Tamura a coward for being afraid of his own quirk when he explained why he was wearing gloves that were partially fingerless, which made Tamura miffed, though Kurogiri had calmed him down before he scratched his throat to cause it to bleed again in frustration. And Katsuki, even though he was friends with Izuku, kept calling him Deku and pathetic and a weakling, which made both orphan boys upset and asked him not to insult him anymore, which he refused. Izuku told him he was a good guy despite that, but that wouldn't stop the boys from being mad at him, though for Izuku's sake they remained calm as best as they could. Concern. The insults that were mentioned that Katsuki called Izuku. He did seem like a good guy who wanted to become a hero, but he had a bad attitude that rubbed them the wrong way. Wondering if his posy was anything like him and were glad that they were not here today. While Katsuki had not done harm to him physically, which they were thankful about, his words were still hurtful. They could only hope that it won't get worse than this. Respect. Despite their frustration at him, they had some respect towards him, believe it or not. He was tough and never backed down from a fight when he challenged Kurogiri and won even when Kurogiri had the evasive advantage. He was determined to become a hero and admired All Might just as much as Izuku did. He, to their shock, didn't insult them for being orphans and runaways after hearing, even if only a bit after some consideration, from them about them being mistreated and almost killed because of their quirks, after showing him their scars and still healing wounds when he would not stop asking them questions about their past. Be glad you chose to run away before that happened. They're the ones who are wrong, not you. They can't see the potential of how your quirks can be used to help people, to make your existence a nightmare, because it is stupid. They're too blind to see that. He told them that, which actually did touch them, as they and Izuku, despite being confused as to why the people at their orphanage acted like that instead of helping them, agreed with him. He actually wanted them to prove their tormentors how wrong they were. Sure, he said he will beat them at their fullest, but he told them to not give up no matter what. He even told them that scars were not always a bad thing and that they were proof that they survived something very tough, which Izuku agreed. After a while of thinking, despite feeling insecure, they agreed that after their wounds healed they would not hide their scars, they would show how tough they were. A sense of protectiveness for Izuku. Still, despite that too, they could not help but feel protective of their savior and yet to get his quirk green hair boy. They found that he was actually younger than them, but just a little bit, as Izuku was a month younger than Tamura and a few months younger than Kurogiri, and despite only knowing him for a day they felt like they've known him their whole lives. Were not for Izuku they could have died on the streets or worse, so it would make sense that they would feel the need to protect their new friend like he were their younger brother. This newfound protectiveness was new to them but was by no means uncomfortable. It felt nice protecting someone for once instead of themselves. But it was what happened after saying goodbye to Katsuki and leaving the park to go home that put it to the test. On their way home, Izuku offered to treat them both to a fruit smoothie at the local cafe with the money his mom gave him to use for them to get something to eat on the way back or to call her for an emergency. Smoothies were pretty cheap, so it wasn't any trouble there. And Izuku insisted, as he was surprised and sympathized with them as they told him that they never had a smoothie before. Eventually they caved in due to overall curiosity about it. Showing them the booth that he and his mom would use when they came here, they looked at the menu before the waitress around her late 30s came to get their order. Izuku ordered the honey apple and lemon smoothie, Tamura asked for the blueberry and pineapple smoothie, and Kurogiri requested a peach and mango smoothie. As soon as she left after collecting their orders, the boys started to talk again. Have heard of any heroes before we met yesterday? Izuku asked them, wanting to know at least a partial bit of their backstory. Besides All Might? I think I recall a few other names. Ingenim, Endeavor, Gang Orca, 13. Best Genist and recent hero who debuted not long ago, Manuel? Kurogiri listed the one he could recall on the top of his head as Tamura nodded, saying, "Yes, that's right. Do you know anything about them?" Kurogiri asked Izuku, who nodded enthusiastically, "I sure do." Being a hero fanatic and one who wrote down and studied quirks, it was a piece of cake for him, and being asked what he knew about the heroes he's studied was like going to the amusement park. In other words, it made him happy since he never had friends besides Kakin, and whenever he talked a lot about heroes, other kids his age would stray away from him, calling him a wish-washy nerd. So Izuku told them about the heroes they've listed, going into detail about their quirk and how they are used, fighting tactics and deeds they've done. Tamura and Kurogiri listen inattentively in fascination. This filled Izuku with joy, being able to tell them, no, anyone genuinely interested really besides Kakin, about what he knows with no annoyance and not walking away after the first few minutes or less than that. And the more he talked about heroes and the more questions they asked, the more hopeful and excited the two orphan boys became at this. They talked. Well, Izuku did that mainly while the other two boys listened, only speaking when they had a question or made a comment on something. Hours seemed to go by until the waitress came by with their smoothies. She could not help but giggled at the delight that the boys showed on their faces. So innocent, bubbles of sunshine to brighten one's day, eager to learn. Truly, children were a blessing. She knew this as she had 3 loving daughters at home around the same age as them, though a little older, and they had as much joy as these 3 did. The way they got along and how they interacted from what she saw, if it were not for the obvious different color in skin tan variation, and mainly having hair and eyes being different colors, she could have mistaken them to be brothers. Her giggling caught the boys' attention as they turned face her. "Here you go, sweethearts," she said as she set their respective smoothies on the table in front of each boy, giggling again as the orphan boys blushed at that. They've never been called that before. While it was endearing, they could not help but blush, not used to being called something like that. "Enjoy," she told them. "Thank you," Izuku chimed. The other 2 snapped out of their daze as they thanked her as well before she left. However, just as the boys were about to take a sip of their cool and delicious drinks, "Nobody move." Trouble reared its ugly head. The trio flinched when they heard that as they all turned to the entrance where the voice came from, only to see 3 guys clad in black attires. One lad the characteristics of a lemur as he held a gun in his hand. One had sharp teeth and had long jagged claws coming from his fingers and toes as he was the only one not wearing shoes. And the last one had a very long chain wrapped around his body, around his legs, waist, arms, and neck as the last bit hung like a scarf. Everyone realized that they were villains as many of the innocent people in the cafe frozen. Some screams and some ducked under the table to take cover, some clung unto their parents as they held their kids close to them protectively. Quiet, the lemur human shouted as he shot the gun up at the ceiling, scaring everyone as this made them quiet down, also causing some to fall on their knees in fear. Do as we tell ya and no one will have to die today, you get it? The chain guy ordered them. Do anything stupid or call the police and you'll bleeding so bad that this whole joint will be flooding with blood. No one dared move aside from shaking in fear, especially for the kids as the parents urged their kids to stay calm and stay quiet, which caused the guy with the gun to shoot the ceiling again in frustration, telling them to be quiet while the claw guy snarled at them, causing them to back away to avoid getting miced. The only ones without a parent to help them was Izuku, Tamura and Kurogiri, who were all terrified. Never had any of them thought that they would be involved in an incident like this. Tamura was hugging himself, trying to not squirm in his seat. Kurogiri tried to steady his breathing, trying to stay calm, trying to think of some way for them to get out of here. And as for Izuku, which the other two boys saw quite clearly, Izuku had his mouth covered to muffle his voice, tears coming down from his eyes as he was shaking, no, trembling in fear. He cried easy and was easy to scare too, being a bit smaller than most boys his age. This is really happening. Izuku thought, this is bad. Seeing him in this state scared the two orphan boys more than this. Seeing the boy who had saved them, gave them his home, food, toys and clothes to share, who always seemed to smiling no matter how things were in this state of deep fear, made them concerned for his welfare. Without another thought they moved closer to him and held him close to them in comfort. Izuku being in the middle with Tamura on his left and Kurogiri on his right, as Izuku held them close to him too as he felt their comforting and protective embrace. It didn't stop him shaking, but at least this, to the relief of the orphan boys, kept Izuku from letting his voice be made known and risk getting a bullet in his head. Thankfully the crooks didn't notice this as they moved further in. No one dared move nor made a sound as this made the crooks smile with malice. The lemur man walked over to the register with gun pointed at the cashier as the lady knew exactly what they wanted, while the other two crooks kept their eyes on everyone to ensure that no one did anything funny. Now in the arms of the other two boys, Izuku able to calm his breathing a bit, and in turn allowed him to think. There were 27 people in the cafe, including him, Tamura and Kurogiri, excluding the three crooks. A handful of couples had kids, which make easy targets to take hostage or worse, kill to ensure no one will try to attack or follow them. They could be targets too. All the crooks had quirks, lemur, claws, and from seeing the last one using quirk to threaten the cashier further, his chains he made to move at his will, metal manipulation. Some of the frightened people hid under the table to avoid being seen nor shot at, a futile attempt. Some were out in the open and some were at the end race, while the cashier and two workers stood behind the counter with guns and chains pointed at them. Everyone was scared, and if they try anything they could stir up panic and everyone would get hurt or worse. If it were just the three of them, Kurogiri could just warp them out, and if not, then Tamura could decay the wall next to them or the booth seat to make a hole for them to hide in until he made a tunnel from rotting away the material, thwart it and get out of it to get help. But it wasn't, these people needed help dash. Wait a second. Izuku thought as something struck him in his thoughts. Kurogiri. What the? Tamura. Decay. Material. People. That was when the idea struck him. It was so simple, but it wasn't easy. If they dare move from their seats, it would only plant targets on their back to immediately hit. They could not speak either. How could they talk to each other without getting noticed? Izuku racked through his brain trying to come up with a solution. What other forms of communication were there that doesn't cause sound? Sign language? Silent but would get noticed? Plus Izuku barely knew how to use it in a sentence as he was still learning, plus he didn't know if there were others here who knew it. Mouthing words? No, same deal on the first bit. What else was there? Let's hit the bar after this, said the guys with the claws. I'm hankering for some more sarsaparilla. We can't hit the bar after this, you idiot. We got other stops to do today. Get you head out the toilet, Cody. The guy with the chains which he wrapped around his body again reprimand him. Weren't you listening before we got here? Of course I was. We're not. Both of you be quiet or I'll shoot your eyes out, the guy holding lemur human told them, his eyes didn't leaving the cashier as she was still emptying the money from the registration into the bag they demand her to put it in. Seriously, you and Morris are as bad as dogs and cats. My hearing may not be the same as it was, but I can still hear you too, as if you were yelling in megaphones. Sorry, Kudo, both lackeys apologized to him. Izuku heard what they were saying. From listening to their conversation he could make note on a few things. Judging by their accents, 2 of them were from America and 1 was from Japan. Their names were Morris, Cody, and Kudo. They liked to hit the bar after their heists, and Morris and Cody seemed to argue a lot. And Kudo said that his hearing was not too good. How so? He wasn't sure. But there was something nagging at him, something that was telling him something. What was it? Morris, Cody, and Kudo. Morris, Cody, and Kudo. Morris. Cody. Kudo. Morris. Cody. Morris. Coden dash. Wait, doesn't it sound like dash? That was when it struck him like a bolt of lightning as the idea struck him. Morse code. That's it. The look of the idea just struck him didn't go by unnoticed for the 2 orphan boys. Before the 2 could say anything, Izuku removed one of his hands from the arms of the 2 boys and started to tap his index under the table. The tapping came in a pattern that seemed familiar to them as they focus on that, and the way Izuku looked back at them, while his face showed fear, still it also showed like he was serious, looking at Tamura and then Kurogiri before looking at the criminal with the lemur features. Lemurs were supposed to have sensitive hearing, but he did just say his hearing wasn't good, and upon seeing that he didn't look their way it meant he wouldn't hear what Izuku was doing, as Izuku showed some relief before getting serious and looked back at his hand as if he focused on getting his message through. Izuku, guys, I got an idea. Do you understand? Wait, is this Morse code? Both of the orphan boys thought as it hit them like lightning. In case you are wondering how they know Morse code, that's easy. For Izuku, his mother is good friends with one of the neighbors who used to be in the military. He met him through his mom. During the times when his mom had errands to take care of and the times Katsuki's family were too busy or away on business or something and had no time to babysit, this retired gentleman, Kenichi, a quirkless but respected sergeant, would watch over him. He had taught him, after asking him and he agreed to do it, Morse code in case of an emergency, as he had taught a few heroes on how to do it in the past. A hero must always have a way to communicate to his comrades by others' means and be prepared, as he had said. As for Tamura and Kurogiri, they taught themselves that from a discarded, old but still readable book on it. How something like that ended up in the orphanage that could help them was beyond them, but they were not complaining, so they could still talk to each other if they were a little far from the other, in case something happens, or if they were not allowed to speak verbally because of their caretakers, grounding them for being disruptive during dinner a few times. Yesterday they found out that they all knew how to do it, and used it to talk to each other as practice and when they played the hero game with Izuku's mom. Taking a quick glance at the crooks, both Tamura and Kurogiri removed one of their hands from Izuku and moved them under the table so to avoid them getting seen. Tamura, we hear you loud and clean. Kurogiri, what is it? Izuku, it's risky and it may go wrong, but if we do it right we can at least do our part to help these people, and stall for time until the pros get here. Tamura, asterisk what? Are you crazy? Izuku, we want to help people like you do, but are you really sure you want to try and do something, especially since those guys can kill us if we even make a peep? What if we get caught and die? We're just kids, what can we do? Asterisk. Izuku, I'm aware of that, but if we don't do something at least, more lives will be at risk here. Kurogiri, even if you have yet to get your quirk, we are outgunned and we aren't pro-heroes? Izuku, asterisk, like I said we've got to try something at least. We may be kids, and yes we could get hurt or worse, we may not be heroes yet, but we gotta be brave, and a hero is always risking their safety to save others no matter the cost, right? You guys don't have to join me if you don't want to, I understand, but as for me I want to help them, quirk appearing now or not. If it means they will live, I gotta risk it. I don't want to die really, but if it means saving them then I'm willing to do it, asterisk. There was complete silence for them as Izuku waited for their response. He understood and knew that this was a lot of pressure for them, This was dangerous for any of them. Honestly, he actually didn't want to get them involved, though with their quirks they can help turn the tables, but if they choose not to he would not be mad at them nor force them. He'll have to think of something else. Taking a glacé at each of them, he saw that they turned to him with slight looks of concern, but they soon got serious before they all turned back to the table as the two boys gave him their reply. Kurogiri and Tamura. Kurogiri, we don't want to die either, but if it means we can help these people, these quirks that others forsake us for having, even if for a moment to prove our oppressors wrong. Tamura, if you're willing to do this, then so will we. Izuku was stunned by this, but quickly he smiled in pride for them, happy to hear their answers. Izuku, here's the plan. Meanwhile with the crooks, the lemur human, Kudo, the leader, still had his focus the cashier as she did exactly as she was told. That's right, keeping filling it up until the register is empty. Kudo told her before he turned to the male workers and barked orders at them. Hey you two! Don't just sit there like gargoyles. One you start emptying the other register and the other get us 3 strawberry shortcakes to go, or else I'll let one of my friends introduce you to a chain of events you don't want to see. When he said chain, Morris let his quirk activate as the chain that was wrapped around his body came off as it spiraled around him in a menacing way to the two men as they did as they were told. While this was going on, neither of them nor the other two crooks noticed a small portal opened behind Cody from behind him as a small hand came through as it grabbed one of the guns by the handle that was sticking out of one of his back pockets. Upon contact, the gun started to change color from charcoal black to a dark ash gray, and just as a crack or two was about to form, the hand let go of it before moving onto the second gun. Some of the hostages were the ones who saw it as several portals opened up in front of them. For the ones under the tables, big enough for them to get through but hidden behind them so to keep them hidden from the villains. Immediately they knew that they were being saved, but by who? Several of them were looking for whoever their savior was, until their eyes landed on the 3 boys sitting in the booth. Much to their surprise and Conquerin, serious looks on their faces, the green-haired boy was focused on the villains, keeping his eyes on them as he seemed to be signaling the other two by tapping his fingers under the table. The light blue-haired boy had one gloved hand on the green-haired boys, while the other hand with no glove was grabbing the weapons behind the enemy's backs, possibly to weaken and cripple their arsenal should things go awry, as he too was focused on the villains, and as well his hands to make sure he can see what he was doing, and the black-haired boy with the silver metal collar who was leaning against the green-haired boy's shoulder, hand both hands under the table with a black and purple energy coming out of his hands that were the same colors as the portals they were seeing, as the black-haired boy briefly but visibly nodded to them as if telling to things were going to be okay, that they needed to escape and get help. At first this worried the civilians as they knew that these boys were putting themselves in grave danger even though they were helping them. These 3 should not try to intervene knowing they could get killed. They are 4-year-olds who wouldn't feel this worried in a situation like this. But they kept their mouths shut knowing that if they tried to intervene as well, you get the picture. Time was short so they had to hurry. Meanwhile, outside of the shop just half a block away was an adult male with smooth dirty blonde hair combed neatly, sharp dark blue eyes, light tan skin, wearing blue jean material that was somewhat like a jumpsuit with a very tall collar that covered his mouth and nose, and wore black dress shoes. He was here on business, but a different kind, as he was here as to return a favor to an old friend of his as he checked his phone for the address. Not too far now, just a few more blocks to go, he said to himself. But as he looked up he saw something both odd and immediately told him there was trouble brewing. Tamura's POV. Is this how it ends for us? Will we be killed right here? Will I die? If so, then at least I'll die having done something a hero would have done, and having good memories with Kurogiri and Izuku and his mom. Oh, sorry you guys reading this? My bad, first time doing a character point of view and breaking the fourth wall. You don't know what happened to you? Or you want to know what happened after the previous chapter? Well, allow me to explain. Izuku, Kurogiri and I, despite being kids, endangering ourselves by doing this, used our heads and quirks, Kurogiri and I, to get people to safety and away from these criminals who have trapped us and threatened to kill us and everyone in here in this cafe. I used my quirk to weaken their guns and other tools to the point that, while they may be intact now, they cripple to bits if they squeeze them too hard or try to shoot the first bullet / use them, Kurogiri used his quirk to not only get my hand closer to them to do that but also to get people who were not in the view of these villains' eyes to safety so that they won't get hurt and can get help from the pro-heroes before something worse happened, and Izuku, our unannounced leader, leading us on what we need to do via Morse code. Quick fact here. When Kurogiri uses his quirk, he can feel those going through his portals, so when the person is out of it, he can close it without endangering them nor their welfare. Even if he can't visibly see where his portals are, he knows where they are bases on where he opened them. And me? Not much I can think of that was not already explained besides that when all 5 of my digits touch a thing that is of the same material, my quirk works immediately on physical contact. We had only managed to get about 15 people out from under the tables and near the entrance, and weaken most of their hand weapons that were visible, guns mainly, excluding the one in Kudo's hand, a taser, 2 knives and rope, for tying up and choking obviously. Suddenly and unfortunately I sneezed, pretty loudly, and my hand jerked at that reaction, causing it to smack into Cody, who already noticed a moment before this that a good portion of the people in here were gone, and alerted his comrades. Not good, I thought to myself in panic, and I'm pretty sure that the others were thinking the same thing as me, as I pulled my hand out of Kurogiri's portal just as it and the other ones closed due to this. Thankfully no one was in nor going through them at the moment as far as I saw. And sadly for us this didn't go unnoticed as we were immediately spotted. Before any one of us could try to duck under the table or jump out booth and run or yelp, Morris, the guy with the chains, had us restrained in a tight huddle with our backs against each other with his chains as he brought them and us back over to him and his cronies as the 3 of us were struggling to escape and get free with no success. Well, what do we have here? He sneered at us with a smirk that made me shudder. A couple of brats trying to cause trouble? Didn't your mommies tell you shouldn't try to mess with someone who's bigger than you? Especially when they have powerful quirks? Didn't this guy ever brush his teeth? Because it smells like a broken toilet. I didn't dare say that aloud though, knowing I was already in deep water with the others. Cody grabbed another gun from one of his pockets. Why he had guns on him when he clearly had a deadly quirk was beyond me, extra precaution maybe? As he pointed them at us as he gripped them hard. Bad choice, because once he did the guns started to crack before they immediately crippled to pieces, startling him and other 2 guys. He exclaimed as he checked his other weapons along with his cohorts. The results were the same with most of their other weapons as they too crippled to dust. Immediately Kudo glared at us as he immediately figured out what had happened. You stupid rugrats. Trying to play the hero card, aren't ya? Too bad that it ends up digging each of your own graves, Morris. Not needing to be told, he tightened his chain grip on us as it constricted us even more, the feeling that my lungs, and no doubt the others too, were being squeezed by bones was not a pleasant feeling as I could feel my oxygen starting to run low as I and the others struggled harder, only for it to waste our energy and make it an even tighter on us. I had died. Doing what the hero would do. Izuku was able to wheeze out in a strained tone. It hurt me to hear him in this matter more. It seems like it's the end for us. He knew this, we all did. But he was willing to give up his life for others. That's what a hero does, right? Same here. A hero is lives to save others. After all, Kurogiri said in the same manner, saying what all had said on the movie we saw yesterday. We had a good run, and died doing something good, right? I didn't want to die, I knew that others did too, but at least we will die together. Agreed. If it means these people can live. From the cost of, so be it. I said in the same manner as I started to wince at the amplified pain I'm feeling now. Tears of pain being squeezed out of me as they threatened to fall from my eyes as they were closed tightly but could not stop the tear flow. However, just when I felt like I was going to faint and be killed, something completely unexpected happened. It happened so fast that I hardly had time to process it, but I'll get to the point as to make it easy for both of us. The feeling of being constricted by a boa constrictor suddenly loosened before we fell, landing a bit hard on our rears as me and the others gasped for a breath of air, coughing as we held our chests, after I hastily with some difficulty pulled the glove back on my exposed hand, welcoming the air back in our lungs as soon as we got the chains of us, as even though we were focused on that mainly, and I assume the others are aware of this too, I think. Could hear the crooks suddenly shouting in surprise and grunting as if they were struggling. What gives? I can't get free kudo. We all can't, you idiot. As I looked up after I gained back control of my breathing, I saw that the villains were all wrapped tightly in thin but durable thread, it seems, around the bodies, legs and arms. It must be someone's quirk. Wait, we're free, so someone saved us. But who? Best Jeanist. I heard Izuku exclaimed in excitement and relief as I turned to him, as the expression matched his tone before I turned to what he was staring at, as I thought in disbelief. Wait, Best Jeanist? The pro hero that's one of the top 10 pro heroes in Japan? There he was, right there, in the flesh, a real pro hero, tall, slender, yet has a good build in his body, wearing clothes that look like it was made from a jean material like fur pants, and some of which covered his mouth and nose, his hair combed and smooth, and he had his arms up as his quirk seemed to use the thread of his clothes around his sleeves, as they looked ripped up as they now ended at his elbows, but there were dozens of threads coming from it, so this was his quirk at play. This was what Izuku was talking, right? Normal POV. You villains should be ashamed of yourselves, he said cool but sternly, using your quirks for something so petty as this, or to murder children in blinding anger. They're innocent, yet you choose to drench your hands the blood of them to stop them from doing what's right? It's nothing but disgraceful if you ask me. A/N. I've never done a dialogue for this character, Best Jeanist, before, so please forgive if I messed up somewhere. Shut up, you walking spool. Kudo demanded before he threatened, let us go or I'll choke you with my tail. But it was ignored, as the police came in soon after to take the thugs to jail after putting on quirk restraints on them with some to no difficulty. Thankfully nobody got seriously hurt nor killed. The trio were only sore from the chains that had constricted them and had some red marks from the chains, and might have bruises later, but otherwise they were alive and well. After checking on everyone to make sure that they were okay, the three were pulled aside so the police and Best Jeanist, for some reason unknown to them, to talk with them about what had happened and what they saw and heard, since they were caught in the middle of it and seemed to have paid closer attention to what had transpired. So they told them as the pro hero examines them with interest. And I believe that oughta do it, said the policeman as he finished writing it all down before he turned to them, a look that seemed calm, yet his voice was both that and stern. Thank you for your cooperation. Now I understand that you were trying to help in this case. While it was brave of you three to do that and that plan of yours was very clever, it was still seriously dangerous of you all to do that. He scolded, all of you could have gotten killed. Had Best Jeanist not seen those people crawling out that warp gate a little away from the cafe, you all would have been dead. Don't ever do anything like that again unless you want to be pushing up daisies. They flinched at that. They knew it had been dangerous, they knew all of that. Yet despite their good deed they still got scolded for intervening like this. Though it might have upset them, they let it go, knowing few things. 1. Getting upset would solve nothing. 2. Despite having done a heroic deed, and received some compliments from those they saved, and they sang that their strategy and quirks, Izuku didn't have his yet, were great, which made Kurogiri and Tamura, especially, happy. They were kids, not pro-heroes. The law states that only heroes could intervene and stop the bad guys doing their civic duty for society and using their quirks then. But in a situation like this, for them it was a no-no, as using your quirk in public, unless it was an official contest/competition, they were in UA or any of the hero schools, for certain jobs, training in private, home, gym, etc., ECT, was illegal. And 3. They knew it was dangerous from the start. They were kids that could easily get crushed in this case. Getting into dangerous situations was reckless and risky. After a bit more scolding from him, he left them alone as Best Jeanist wanted to talk to them in private, which he complied. It would have been exciting to talk to a pro hero in person if they three were not feeling sad and wanted to cry hard at the moment from that and on how that officer was correct. It's okay, there's no need to be sad, he assures them as he knelt down to meet then at eye level. While the scolding was necessary to ensure you know what you did was reckless and what you shouldn't do in the future, what you did was admirable. They didn't reply back, though they did look up to see him, tears in their eyes, yet none fell. Expressions of sadness still lingered, yet confusion was at the forefront now. After I was told what was happening, waiting for the right moment to intervene, I was watching you three from the corner of my eye. Despite what was happening, despite how scared you three undoubtedly were, you stayed calm, or as well as you could, and were able to rescue as many people as you could, giving them the chance to escape and call for help, diminishing their arsenal and causing a distraction, and despite getting caught, what you all said back there. Willing to sacrifice your lives for these citizens, you three clearly know what it means to be heroes. He told them before he added, now I'm not saying that you three should repeat what you did in the future, by all means no. All I'm saying is to be careful, abide by the rules. If this is a profession you want to do, then train so that you may become heroes when you get older, so that you can help in cases like this and more with a hero license. Remember to think calmly before you act, and never lose hope. Do you understand? The three started at him in awe. No one had ever told them that before. It made a warm feeling burst in their chests after the ball of sadness faded, causing them let their tears that were sitting around their eyes fall. All of you have good heads on your shoulders. Don't let that potential go to waste. Train hard, be diligent in your studies, and strive to uphold that hope, so that you may, and I believe that you will, become heroes someday. He told them with a nod. Nobody had ever told them that. Well, Izuku told Tamura and Kurogiri that they could become heroes, though being told by a pro also brought tears to their eyes. As for Izuku, same deal on the second part, but also being told this before he even got his quirk. It made him smile, and the two orphan boys smiled too. All aimed at him. And Best Jeanist smiled back at them under his collar. After that whole fiasco at the cafe, the boys were offered be escorted home by Best Jeanist himself, which the trio accepted after getting them a new order of drinks, as theirs got knocked over and spilled when they got grabbed, and were given the strawberry shortcake slices that the workers were getting for the criminals to avoid getting killed, as a way to say thank you to the kids for their assistance, even though it was risky and dangerous to interfere in the first place, which they accepted as they ate their food on the drive back to the apartment complex, as the two orphan boys enjoyed every taste of their delicious treats, as they had said that they had never had food like this before and it all tasted good. Which made Izuku and the Fiber Master Hero smile at this. How the pro hero knew where they lived without them telling him. They didn't know. When asked, he had said that he knew Inko because he was friends with her husband, so he knew where his wife lived. Though he didn't say more than that, other than his reason being here was to visit Inko, much to the boys' confusion, though they couldn't ask him as they had arrived at their destination. Upon arriving, Inko was surprised that the boys were with a pro hero, one she knew personally. When told what had happened at the cafe, needless to say that the worrying mother gathered the boys into her arms, crying after checking if they were hurt aside from some red marks from the chains, as she was relieved that they were okay. Though she did scold them for their foolish actions, but she was proud of them for doing what they could to help, though she told them to be careful next time and to wait until they were old enough and got permission to do something like that. After getting autographs from Pro Hero, at Izuku's plea, which the Pro Hero didn't mind, Inko shooed them away so that she can talk to the Pro Hero for a bit about something, as she offered him tea, which he accepted. Though they were curious, they complied as they went to Izuku's room to play. Once they were out of earshot, Inko spoke to him as they were seated at the table. Thank you for keeping them safe and getting them home, Tsunago, she said as she wiped another tear away from her eye as she poured him some tea in a cup. Just doing my job, Inko. He nodded. It has been so long since the last time we spoke, hasn't it? About 3 years, yes, and the last time you saw Izuku as well, he was only a year and a half old. And here he is now. Despite almost being 5, he has a good head on his shoulders and is very inquisitive in regards of pro heroes and quirks. Having talked to him in the car, I can tell how much he admires heroes and that he wants to be one someday. Indeed, he just can't wait until he gets his quirk. To be like All Might. Though imagine how he'd react if he finds out you are his uncle, because you were a brother to my husband. Asterisk, chuckled Asterisk, I believe he might explode from excitement there. Asterisk, giggled Asterisk, I believe you're right. All too soon, though, silence befell them as the all-too-familiar feeling of seriousness and concern flowed forth, as the silence hung for what felt like an hour when really it's only been moments before it was broken. Those two boys who were with your son, they're the ones? The pro hero asked her. Yes. Inko nodded. When Izuku brought them here, Tsunago, they looked so sad, lonely, they were hurt, looked like they haven't ever taken a bath, not used to human contract, they looked like they hasn't eaten in days. I mean, I could see their ribs showing through their skin. Clearly they were not treated right. They were abused and tormented. Exactly. It broke my heart seeing them like this, so scared, not used to being in a nice-looking place, crying because they were finally getting something good to eat for once it seems. How cautious and uncertain they acted and still do, though thanks to Izuku that issue is starting to diminish, though still have much to go. They never knew what pro-heroes were really like until Izuku explained to them, clearly not being taught what a TV and utensils are and such, to name a few, not used to having contact with others who want to help them and comfort them, and Tamura crying when Izuku helped him find a way to get a handle on his quirk. Oh, I know that it has to be that if it's not obvious already. Whoever is responsible for this for causing these boys great pain, Tamura especially, and I can't bear to see them so miserable. She told him as tears welled up. Calm down, Inko, he told her gently but firmly, handing her a tissue which she accepted. The police and my pupils are already on this. Once we've caught them and have finished our investigation, I'll report to you about it and the lowdown of it. Asterisk sniffle asterisk right? They may have looked fine on the outside, but I could definitely see it in their eyes. They've been through a lot. They needed help. They don't want to feel pain anymore. Their faces should have appeared more youthful, but instead I saw they looked worn out and have been deprived of any nutrients. Especially for Tamura, it sickens me to think that these two were forced to face that alone. It breaks my heart seeing this as well. I promise you, Inko, I will get to the bottom of this and ensure that they will not have to deal with it again. But in the meantime, I'll talk to the police further about the boys' housing situation and that you've volunteered to foster them if you haven't already. They can talk to you over the phone so they won't have to come and frighten the boys, as they already seemed shaken from meeting them earlier. They will need to hear from you about their condition daily, even some photos as proof. Asterisk nodded asterisk, of course, and I'm counting on you, Tsunagu. Of course. But after all of this is resolved, what will happen for the boys? You do know what will be in store for them, right? And their fragile state. Well, you see, triplets, in the deepest dark alleys in the city, as the skis turned orange as the end of the day came near, where no one was around, nor did many want to take those routes, often due to the all-too-common fact that villains like to lurk there, and getting caught there by unfriendly faces was something that ought to be avoided, stood a man wearing a black hoodie jacket as most of his appearance was shrouded in darkness, in a fit of rage, punching and hitting and basically tearing up anything that could be moved and easily trashed. His yelling and anger could be heard as they echoed off the walls. To say he was furious would be an understatement. The same goes for how high his anger level is right now. Of all the times, why now? I'm afraid I'm going to have to let you go if you don't control that temper of yours. They said, well, joke's on them. Without me they can't maintain that boiler correctly, so production gonna be delayed because of it. The man exclaimed in rage, and if that's not bad enough, I lose my home. Whose bright idea was it to leave a barrel of gas that's leaking near the house while someone was checking on the electrical wires on the pole who had little experience doing it? They say it's my fault. But it's not. He let out one final roar of anger before he started panting, stopping in his tracks, feeling relieved after letting all that anger out, but No was left with another problem. Ever since his beloved had died years back, nothing has gone his way. Nothing he did was enough to make things better besides discarding some old ties, belongings that had too many memories, selling them or outright dumping them in the trash, and having a job which paid enough to pay the bills. Most of the time he'd have his temper under control, but in cases such as this he would let it out in a violent torrent, usually in less crowded areas, so to avoid getting sent to jail for property damage, inflicting harm to others, rare case but still, and using his quirk with no legal license to keep him from getting mixed up with the police. Despite all of that, he got along well enough. Until he lost his job because a coworker who hated him accused him for stealing money from the company, which he didn't do, planted fake proof to make it the truth, and get fired because he could not keep his temper and quirk under control this same time around. He was just thankfully he still had his last paycheck and didn't get turned over to the police. And just when he thought his problems couldn't worsen, he loses his home in an accident on the same day. All of his things are gone, and his car too. With nothing but the clothes on his back, his paycheck, wallet with no credit cards, cell phone and charger, he is left without a home and a job. And he was not going to say, what else can go wrong? Knowing saying it aloud will evoke more problems than what already has on his shoulders. Back to now. Even though he felt better after that episode, he was still mad and had no idea what to do now as he stood there alone. Or so it seemed as a voice was heard. Well, it seems like you've had a rough day, didn't you? Flinching, he turned around to see a man behind him. He too had his appearance cloaked in darkness. Though you definitely has a raging fire in you that, with the right situation, can be very beneficial. The stranger continued. What it to ya? He sneers as he narrowed his gaze at him. It's none of your business. You better not call the police on me, you freak, or you'll regret it. Now why would I do that? The stranger asked, pretending to be confused, when I can see potential in you, one I don't see often in my line of work. Why if I were to turn you over to the authorities you would only be left rotting away in a cell without a chance for a more favorable future, and why just leave you now as you are in your situation to fall apart and die on the streets? That would be unthinkable, wouldn't you agree? And really you losing your home and job in one day wasn't your fault, but those who have put you down and those who cease to put their faults on your shoulders and cause more problems to befall you. They ought to be the ones in jail or on the streets, not you, is what you are thinking, am I not correct? Asterisk raise a brow asterisk what are you getting at? Young man, what if I were to offer you an opportunity too good to refuse? A chance to turn your life around, get back at those who have wronged you and more? Go on, triplets. Training? Tamura asked Izuku as they, Kurogiri and Inko were at the table having dinner. Yeah, when you have a quirk you gotta train yourself to wield it, utilize it in different ways, to get a handle on it so you won't hurt yourself or others by mistake, test your limits and increase them. Each one is different and unique to each person, different possibilities, drawbacks and ways to use them, whether for hero work, certain jobs you have, both of which you need a license, special permission or a permit to use your quirk, or to use for your everyday life at home. Izuku explained, smiling. Is there anything he doesn't know when it comes to quirks? Both of the orphan boys thought in surprise. Like Mom for example, Izuku continued, she mainly uses her quirk at home. She can attract small objects towards her which really helps around the kitchen and the house. And then there's Dash. And before they knew it, Izuku was muttering words all over the place, most of which Tamura and Kurogiri could not pick up. Is he okay? Orphan boys thought. Anime wet drop appeared on the side of their heads. Inko giggled at this as she assured them, don't worry boys, Izuku does that all the time, a habit that occurs now and then. The boys nodded as they now understand. Izuku? Kurogiri asked him, shaking him at the shoulder as this snapped the green-haired boy out of his muttering phase as he turned to him, realizing he did it again. Oh sorry Kurogiri, that happens all the time, what's up? He asked him after he apologized. Do you think it may be possible to train our quirks? He asked him. Izuku's eyes shined as he smiled widely, nodding vigorously, absolutely. Before he turned to his mother, Mom, can we do that please? Asterisk nodded asterisk of course, why don't we all go to the quirk gym tomorrow and do that, so you all won't get into trouble for using your quirks in public and can train in safety and where there are trainers there to be of assistance? Inko offered. This caused the orphan boys, though Tamura more hesitantly, to smile like Izuku as they all agreed, of course. Triplets. Yes of course. Thank you very much. Yes I will, night. Inko hung up as she sighed and leaned back on the couch, closing her eyes as she allowed her thoughts to process all that had transpired today. The morning had been pleasant when she waved goodbye to the boys as they went out to play after giving them instructions before they left, and she got started on the chores. Nothing eventful happened until 3 hours later when she came to find not only her son and the boys but also best jeanist / Tsunaga Hakamata, the one she hired to take on the case of Tamura and Kurogiri, at her front doorstep. She was not expecting nor happy to learn that the boys were involved in a villain attack at the cafe and almost got killed, but she was relieved and happy that they were rescued by her old friend and brother and proud of the boys for helping get most of the people out, avoid getting killed and away from the danger, though she still scolded them for endangering themselves before she hugged them and they hugged back, though Tamura and Kurogiri were more hesitant before they relaxed and slowly returned it. After talking to Tsunago for a good hour or maybe less than that he left to go forth with his investigation and went to call the police for the second time this week. This time about how the boys were doing as yesterday she told the officers she wanted to foster them until further notice without alerting the boys. After that phone call she went finishing her chores. She didn't have work today, which was all done online. Play heroes and villains with the boys before dinner. After that and making plans for tomorrow, the boys went to go take their bath and play afterwards before bed. After she got her bath done, she went to tuck them in, read them a story and kiss their foreheads, causing Tamura and Kurogiri to blush as red as tomatoes, before she bid them good night. Once the boys were sound asleep, Inko made 2 more calls that day, one to the nearest quirk gym from the house from the phone book to schedule an appointment, and one to Tsunagu, as even though she knows that he can take care of himself, she couldn't help but worry for his well-being. And that of the 2 orphan boys who were in the middle of it all. So far he hasn't found out anything, although his findings did reveal, after Inko asked the boys discreetly of where they lived, which they said Osaka, despite them being vague on where that was in Japan, as they didn't really know where they lived there. They never got out much, nor did they learn much about what was outside the place that couldn't be a home, that several citizens did. In fact, hear the sound of constant gun shooting around the time the boys left Osaka, and bullet marks were found in the nearby area seemingly coming from one direction in the bad parts of the city, indicates that they were being chased for quite a while before losing their pursuer, as they found traces of the boys' individual blood on the ground here and there, though no DNA of anyone else touching the bullets was found, and were about to investigate that, so Inko had to hang up so her friend could get back to work. While they seemed to have a lead, it was too soon to go and jump the gun. Still knowing, and the thought of that there was a clear indication that the boys were being chased to be killed on the day in question, nearly made her faint right there. She can only hope that all of this would be resolved soon, so that the boys wouldn't have to fear going back nor be in danger by all of this any longer, and she can go forth with what she has been thinking about, and after some talking with Tsunagu on it, for a while. But for now she will wait and hope. And make sure the boys and her son will not get into trouble again, even though the last time was not the boys' fault for getting involved in the first place, soon, but she was sure that the boys learned something valuable today and would be more careful next time. Despite them worrying her before and the scolding she gave them, she was proud of them for their bravery and for helping those people so they can get help from the police and pro-heroes, which they did. Had they not done that, they would have perished, something she would not be able to endure. Which brought her back to the boys' situation, which weighs heavily on her mind. Just thinking about it caused Inko sighed again. What a day it's been today. Please solve this case for them. Tag. You're it? Hey, no tag backs. You're too slow. The boys were playing tag at the park as Inko was there watching them on a park bench, keeping an eye on the boys while she read her book. It was bright sunny day and the weather was fair, so she thought it would be good for the boys to go outside and play, get some vitamin D from the sun instead of being cooped up in the apartment. She thought it would be good for them and her, but honestly, it was just to distract her and ease her worries, which hasn't exactly lowered, much to her dismay. Though she tried to hide it under a smile to not worry the boys, and hopefully trick herself, the worries inside with it, that things were fine, even though they weren't. It has been almost 2 days since her friend/pro hero has spoken to her since the last he called. He told her not to call for fear of interference in the case, and for fear of her and the boys' safety, he would call her when it was case closed. She had to wait, even though she was wrought with worry and it was practically, figuratively, killing her. She had to stay strong for him and the boys. Just seeing the boys playing, having fun as if the events from earlier that week haven't happened, did help lessen some of her worries. She was thankful that none of them were badly hurt, scarred, or in Tamura and Kurogiri's case got more scars to add to their less than desirable collection, nor have even had any nightmares regarding it or anything bad from the past, in Tamura and Kurogiri's case, which somewhat surprised her, but still she was relieved. She had taken note that since the incident the 3 seemed to have gotten closer to the other, treating each other almost like they were brothers, and Tamura and Kurogiri no longer seemed shy around him, nor even her for that matter. In fact, they seemed more accepting of her hugs and started to ask her questions about things just as they did Izuku from day one, which warmed her heart. Help! Suddenly cried a voice which caught everyone's attention. The voice sounded very young, like around the boy's age, more high than theirs, as it sounded like a girl. Upon turning to the source of it, they see something that struck them with deep concern and shock. There was a teen, about 15, deep tan skin, dressed in punk clothing, orange hair and dark brown eyes, with a scar in the shape of a graze on his forehead and with a smirk that was anything but friendly. His hand left was extended as there seemed to be 2 young girls, 4 years old, in a honeycomb cage made of stone. And the two girls in question were both trembling in fear. One girl was sobbing, holding herself in a hug, hunched like she was trying to shink herself to make herself disappear, as she had short black hair. Her eyes were shut so you could not see her eye color. She had fair light tan skin. She wore a pink sundress with a red ribbon around it and red sandals. And the one holding her close and trying to keep a brave face had long black hair in a high spiky ponytail. She too had fair light tan skin, hematite gray eyes which had tears in them but none fell. She wore a red t-shirt, a gray skirt, and black running shoes. "Leave us alone, you bully!" the girl holding the sobbing girl exclaimed. "What did we ever do to you?" "Nothing," he simply said in malice, his sick smirk deepen. "Just needed to practice using my quirk since I haven't done so since I got sick last week. Going to a gym is out of the question for my price range, so I gotta do it here. I needed someone to help me practice it, and you two just so happened to be close by. You could have just asked us instead of assaulting us like this," she yelled. "Now where would the fun be in that?" he asked mockingly. Just then, a black vortex opened up under the girls and they yelped as they vanished through it before it disappeared. This made the punk dumbfounded and confused as he was wondering what just happened. "Leave them alone, you meanie." Turning to the source of it, he saw a green-haired boy with a look of that showed upsetment and defiance. A tall black-haired boy who had misty black hands for a few seconds before they became normal hands, as he had a look of utter disgust. A light blue-haired boy who had a look that screamed anger. And lastly a woman who had green hair like the first boy, comforting the girls as she gave him a mortified but very disapproving look. That black mist came from the black-haired boy, so it meant that it was his quirk that teleported the girls out of the cage. Hurting and tormenting those smaller than you for your own entertainment is just despicable, Kurogiri told him with a calm but stern and frustrated tone. "People like you are nothing but bullies," Tamura exclaimed as he tightened his fists. "Stop being mean to them and leave them alone," Izuku demanded as he got into a defensive stance. "We won't let you hurt them again." "Oh, isn't this a pleasant surprise?" the punk sneered as his smirk returned. "Now I have 3 new friends to play with. Don't you dare attack them, young man," exclaimed Inko as her gaze deepened as the punk turned to her, only now realizing that Inko an adult as he took a step back as his expression changed into a glare. "You should be ashamed of yourself, attack innocent people, children no less, to just practice your quirk with no regard for their safety. Didn't your parents ever teach you to never do that?" "My dad doesn't care. He threw me in juvie so he wouldn't have to deal with me anymore. He hardly had time for me because of work, so why should I care?" he retorted. "No, I don't believe that. I believe that he put you there so you'd think about what you've done and adjust that attitude of yours and not hurt others. He is working hard because he is trying to support you and himself. Have you never taken that into consideration? He put you there and he works hard because he loves you. I just know it. Think about it, jail would be worse than juvie." "Shut up, you hag. You don't know me nor my dad, so stop talking as if you do. I don't care what you believe, you and these brats are going to regret tangling with me." Just as he was about to attack, he was tackled to the ground by 2 police officers as he yelped in surprise as he hit the ground, feeling the all-too-familiar feeling of the quirk restriction cuffs put on his wrists. Needless to say, the punk, whose name was Jim Lee Floyd, whose mom, who is deceased, was Japanese and his dad is American, was ranting, screaming threats and kicking around like a 5-year-old having a tantrum as the police dragged him away. After talking to the gang for a good 5 minutes, Kurogiri getting a compliment on how clever it was for him to use his quirk to get the girls out of harm, which made him blush a bit before he said thank you, thanking them for their assist and reassurance that things will be fine, not to mention some talk about getting the young man's father to have a heart-to-heart with his son, and checking on the girls, asking them if they were okay, which said yes, and thankful they were not hurt aside from some minor bruises. The police left. "Thank you for saving us," said the short-hair girl whose eye color were as deep shade of cerulean blue as she smiled, though small but present, at her saviors as she wiped the tears away from her eyes. "Were not for your intervention, I don't know what would have happened," said the tall ponytailed girl. "It's no problem," Tamura told them with a relieved smile. All the anger he had from moments ago, because of what he endured in the past, seeing innocent people suffering and being harmed like he had was just anger-inducing for him, was now gone. "We're just glad that you're okay," Kurogiri nodded, smiling too. You two sure you're okay? Izuku asked in concern. That looked pretty rough back there. You're fine, don't worry, the short-haired girl assured him. It's just bruises, we'll live. The other girl did as well. That's good to hear, said Inko as she sighed in relief. So who are you guys? The short-haired girl asked, though shyness was present in her voice. I'm Izuku Midoriya. Izuku introduced himself first before he pointed to his mom. And this is my mom, Inko Midoriya. A pleasure to meet you. She nodded as she said that. Kurogiri Fujiwara, the tall black-haired boy, told them with a polite nod. Nice to meet you. Tamura Shigaraki, the pale blue-hair boy, also said with shyness in his voice, as he was not used to introducing himself nor talking to kids his age considering his dark past he shares with Kurogiri. What's yours? Wiley Kodai, said the short-haired girl, looking at the ground a bit. Momo Yayarozu, said the long-haired girl with a bright smile. Nice to meet you all. F. Fujiwara? Kodai asked the boy. Yeah. He asked her, just now noticing she looked kinda adorable. He wasn't in love with her, he's a kid, he means this as a compliment. Offering her a kind smile which made the girl blush a bit out of shyness. Ditch that quirk you uses a bit ago. What is it? She asked him, rubbing her arm a bit as she looked up a bit to face him. She was the second kid his age not from the orphanage who has asked him what his quirk was in sincerity and genuine kindness. Though he didn't show it, he was a bit surprised, but he supposed he would have to get used to it. He then replied, my quirk is called Warp Gate. It can allow me to turn most of my body or parts of it into black mist, and I can teleport myself and others to anywhere so long as I know the general location of the destination in question. I can even, in a sense, carry people inside me when I'm flying in my mist form, like a pouch a kangaroo has to carry their young, mixed with a sort of pocket dimension like on cartoons. I can carry as many people as I want in it as long as I stay in my mist form. Izuku thought of that theory after some careful thinking based on his analysis on Kurogiri's quirk when they went to train at the gym the other day. For Kurogiri, it worked better than he hoped. Tamura could only just disintegrate things, though like all quirks they can change in a variety of ways as the person grows up as they continue to train them, though they probably won't see any of those kinds of changes until a few years later. They also found that overusing his quirk will cause his hands to go numb. That's cool, Kodai said in awe, her shyness lessens a bit. And how about yours, Shigaraki? Yayarozu asked him. For Tamura, he wasn't used to talking to girls, nor talking to other kids his age besides Kurogiri and Izuku, but he had to try and overcome that. He knew that much as being scared of girls and other kids was stupid. Though he wasn't used to anyone asking curious and sincerely to him about what his quirk was. But if he was able to explain to Izuku, then maybe he could, though with reluctance, explain to this girl, whom he had felt rather odd to be around but didn't know why, though he thought she looked pretty. Again, he's a kid, he meant it as a compliment. My quirk is called Decay. Can disintegrate anything I touch with my 5 digits on my hands, and turn it into dust almost instantly. The thing in question has to be touched by all 5 of them in order to work. If some are touching one thing and some touch another and both are of a completely different material, or if I touch it with only a part of or most of my hand, it won't activate, hence why I'm wearing these gloves. They are made of 2 different materials, and some of the sleeves of them, the thumb and index, are not there so I can touch things without accidentally using my quirk and decay something or hurt someone unintentionally. To the gang's surprise, when they were at the gym the other day, they came around someone who had a quirk somewhat similar to Tamura's, only his can grow any plant he can think of if he touches a non-living object with all 5 of his digits and control them. He gave a bit of a pep talk to Tamura, which did help to small but visible degree. Why he sold not be scared of his quirk, and how he has special gloves to enable him to touch things without accidentally activating his quirk thanks to the quirk administration and support office, which he recommended him and the others to it so he could get some proper items to help him keep a better leash on his quirk, which they agreed to. To their surprise, they got 5 new sets of partial fingerless gloves the next day after that, a letter saying to them that their newest member, Mr. Hatsum, went to work on them almost immediately after they received the letter about the quirk requirements, and they were really helping the corporation to flourish. Each set of gloves were different. Dark red gloves with no sleeve for the thumb and pinky. Dark blue gloves with no sleeve for the pinky and middle. Dark blue gloves were no sleeve for the index and middle. White gloves with no sleeve for the thumb and ring. And lastly, the current pair he was wearing right now, and not least, black gloves with no sleeve for the pinky and ring. The gloves worked like a dream as they were made with one material on the inside and a completely different one on the outside, much to their, especially Tamura's, relief. And as for the gloves that Izuku gave him with the first met, Tamura kept them as a spare just in case he lost all of his new gloves or they were all either destroyed, lost or in the wash, and for a sentimental reason of them being the first real gift he was ever given in his whole life and ones that came from one of the few people who he cared about. That's cool. Yaoyorozu exclaimed as her eyes lit with excitement, which surprised Tamura as she was the second, well fourth if you count Kurogiri, Izuku being the second and Inko the third, person who thought his quirk was cool as this made him straighten his posture in surprise. Do you mean it? He asked in disbelief, though she didn't catch that emotion in his voice as Yaoyorozu nodded. Of course, it's kinda like my quirk. You see, it's called creation. I can create any non-living objects from any exposed part of my body from using the fat in my body from the food I eat, but I have to understand how the objects are made and the composition of what I create. Yaoyorozu explained, I can't bring them back in my body though, and overusing it will wear me out. If I don't concentrate on what I am creating, if I don't make it right, it will come out wrong. She told him as she used her quirk, her lower right arm glowing with a pink light as a pair of pink gloves with flowers on it came out of them before she stopped. Her quirk amazed her new friends, and pulled out a pair of red gloves with bricks on it out of her pocket, though more cautiously as she seemed to show some dislike towards them. Like for example, earlier I made a pair of gloves for myself, but I got distracted and made a pair that I didn't want for two reasons. 1, it wasn't the design I was going for, and 2, I somehow made a pair of wool gloves instead of silk gloves, and I'm allergic to wool. She explained before she handed the gloves to Tamura as he hesitantly took them as he caught a glimpse of her hands, which were a bit red, which indicated that the gloves gave her a mild rash as she scratched her hands a bit. But since you have a decay quirk, you can get rid of them for me so I won't have to deal with it, she said smiling. Tamura, while still a bit shy, had no problem with destroying them as he took off one of his own gloves, and as he grabbed the wool gloves, his quirk activated instantaneously as he said, Funny, I'm allergic to wool too. The others knew, Kurogiri knew long before Inko and Izuku did, of this as Tamura had told them this when Inko was picking out clothes for the boys to wear. Tamura and Kurogiri learned this back at the orphanage. The gloves turned to dust as it blew away with the wind. Tamura started scratching his hand a bit due to the allergic reaction to the gloves that were now gone. We only just met and already I can see we a bit in common. Momo chimed as her eyes sparkle. We're both allergic to wool and our quirks are kinda similar, kinda like opposites, but still. I guess. Tamura said, rubbing his head a bit baffled after he put his glove back on. A quirk that can create things and a quirk that can destroy things, yeah, they are kinda are. Izuku agreed. How about you, Midoriya? Momo then asked the green-haired boy, what can you and your mom do? Oh, I don't have a quirk yet, it hasn't appeared yet, but I'm sure it'll come soon. And mom can attract small objects towards her, very handy to use for housework and such? Izuku explained as Inko nodded. Momo nodded. And how about you, Kodai? Izuku then asked the shy short-hair girl, what's your quirk? Mine is called size. Basically I can change the size of any non-living object. By physical contact, I can make things bigger or smaller, and even go back to normal size. Kodai explained simply. Cool. Izuku exclaimed with a wider smile. That would be a handy quirk to have. Kurogiri commented. Thanks. Kodai said to him. Not long after that, the children soon found themselves playing with the other after Izuku asked the girls if they wanted to play with them, which they accepted as Inko sat back on the bench again where her forgotten book was to watch them play and keep an eye on them in case something else happened. Kodai eventually shed her shyness around her new playmates, as did Tanura, and soon everyone was able to play with the other without hesitation. Playing free tag, hide and seek and climb on the jungle gym and such. Inko was happy to see the boys having fun and even had some new playmates to hang with. She knew her son didn't have much friends besides Katsuki, but even then the boy tends to get aggressive from time to time, though thankful he hasn't harmed her son. Mitsuki is a dear friend of hers since preschool. They grew up together, Soon after their sons were born they had arranged playdates for them and they grew up together as they did, though Mitsuki argued with her son a lot as Katsuki got his temper from her. She does love her son and wants to make sure he grows up right, even if his temper will be a hard thing to keep a leash on at times. So seeing Izuku playing with more kids his age made her heart melt. Seeing him and the orphan boys happy with new friends almost made her forget about what she had been worrying about for the past few days. I say almost, but about an hour or two later Inko heard her cell phone ring as she jolted upward, immediately taking it out of her pocket, almost positive that she knew who was calling her as she answered it before the first ring went all the way through. "Hello. Inko, it's me. We did it. And I got the case file. May I come over tonight at 7 to give all the details? And what has been decided?" Something was up. They knew this for sure. When they were leaving the park after they exchange addresses with their new friends to mail each other since the girls don't get to visit that park often and said bye to them, they saw her having a look of that was the definition of deep concern, thoughtfulness and serious all in one package. Though she tried to hide that from them, they were not fooled though. For her sake they acted like they didn't suspect something as they kept it to themselves. Something was going to happen and they could feel it in their guts, and they were right. What felt like it, all day she was either on the phone, pacing when nobody was around or lost in deep thought. As much as they wanted to ask her, Izuku suggested that they wait until she came to them and told them as in her state he thought she might be unwilling to at the moment and may needed time to collect her thoughts and come to terms, or whatever she was thinking of, with what's been brewing in her mind all day. The boys tried to distract themselves with what activities they, mainly leaning on Izuku's ideas, could think of: playing heroes and villains, play Go Fish, watch the hero news for any updates, read some new comics Izuku got a few days ago, play hide and seek, anything to keep them occupied. It only helped to several degrees as their minds would still go back to her. Though they tried hard not to let it get to them, it was hard especially for the 3-4-year-olds. They could only hope that whatever was going on would be resolved soon with no issue. It was after dinner when there was a knock on the front door. Inko got up instantly from the couch where she was sitting with the boys as they were about to watch a movie. This caught the boys' attention as they turned to the direction of the hall that lead to the front door. They hear it open, the heard Inko's and another voice, male, that sounded very familiar were both whispering something that could not heard. A minute or two after they heard the door close, the sound of snuffling before footsteps were present in sound as it got closer to the living area. Soon out of the hallway came Inko and, to their surprise and confusion, Best Jeanist. "Best Jeanist, what are you doing here?" The three boys asked him at once. "I'm here because I have some very important business to discuss with Inko, and with all three of you." He continues as he turns his gaze to look at Tamura and Kurogiri specifically. "It regards you too, Shigaraki, Fujiwara." This started the boys when he said that as they suddenly felt scared, but then the pro-hero said to them, "Rest assured, there's nothing for you two to worry about, neither of you are in trouble nor will be. I'm regarding what you two had to endure in the past and what will come to pass from here on out." While that did relieve them a bit, this left them both confused and uncomfortable. By the past, does he mean, does he know? Both of the orphan boys thought in their heads. "What do you mean by that?" Izuku asked as he was more confused than ever, looking at the two boys in concern. It will be hard to explain let alone digest. The pro-hero side in exhaustion, more mental than physical, but I need you to keep an open mind Izuku, and for you and your mother to keep Tamura and Kurogiri calm for this as this may cause them to have a mental attack on their minds. For their sake, be strong for them, do you understand? Still unsure, but seeing the look in his eyes, he then nodded as the two adults sat in the armchairs that were right by the couch as Inko shut off the TV. The movie could wait until later, right now this was important. Silence befell them as tension was in the air. It along with concern seemed very present until the silence was broken by the Best Jeanist. "As you boys know, I came to this city a few days ago because I had something to discuss with Inko, yet none of you know what it is. Well, she asked me to come, because she wanted to help you too," he said as he looked at Kurogiri and Tamura as they realized that he was talking about them, as did Izuku. But what did she want to help them with? Kurogiri, Tamura, Inko's voice caught the trio's attention as they say that she had a look that was a mix of concern, seriousness and an attempt to try to stay calm as she said, trying to withhold her terror that threatened to build up in her eyes. Do you know why I didn't question why you two were left on the streets aside some bit that Izuku told me of a few days ago? Why I let you stay without another thought? Why I didn't question you about your past too much? Were any of you curious at all about any of that? Now that she brought that up, that was something that left them baffled as they started to wonder about why had she done all of that? Why haven't they questioned her about any of that before until now? Because Inko started to said in hesitation, but she forced herself to say it as with a shaky breath before she continued with her head down. Because I knew that you two were victims of child abuse. This made Tamura and Kurogiri straighten their sitting posture as their eyes widened, but while in their minds they wondered how she knew this, they forced themselves to stay silent as she continues. While Izuku knew only a bit that child abuse was not something to take lightly and that it was a very bad thing, he didn't know how bad it could get. Looking back at how his two friends were when he first met them days ago on their condition, connecting what they said back then, how they acted before and what his mom said, he could only imagine it was like that. Little did he knew that it was a whole lot worse than this. He too stayed silent as his mom continued as he gripped both of the orphan boy's hand in comfort as they subconsciously squeezed his in return. I knew that you two had a very rough life, that you acted the way you did the last few days was because you two were victims of those who hurt you very bad, your injuries, bruises, the fact that neither of you had any real food or even a bath for days maybe weeks, that you were shy and not used to being in a nice home or anyone actually being concerned about you and helping you, it was as clear as the color of the daytime sky. But I chose not to say anything because you all must understand that child abuse is not something taken lightly and a very delicate subject to the victims of it, especially for kids your age. They would feel insecure, unsafe and fearful if asked questions about what they went through. What harm was done to their minds mentally, emotionally and psychologically are both unpredictable and severely fragile. I don't even want to imagine how much you two had endured. I didn't want you two to be scared, so I waited until you two felt comfortable around me and Izuku enough to not feel threatened if I asked you. While I agree that barely 3 days is not enough, but seeing that the situation has been handled thanks to Tsunagu aka Best Jeanist and the police, that you two have been doing better than I hoped even if there is still a long way to go for you two to be completely alright, I feel that now would be the time to ask, and that by telling us you'll be taking some burdens off your shoulders and relieve yourself of the internal stress and pain you two had been holding in by letting it out? Inko then paused as she lifted her head, her face now stained with tears which made the boys feel sad and hurt seeing her like this, especially for the two homeless boys. It startled and hurt them more on the inside as they had never seen her crying nor this sadden within the time they've known her. With another shaky breath in an attempt to steady herself she then asked them though her voice sounded saddening, Please, Tamura, Kurogiri, tell us what happened to you, please, let us all help you? A heavy pregnant silence befell them for what felt like hours as the information that was spouted out was slow being diffused, though it was only for moments that soon turned into a minute and more. At first Inko and the pro-hero thought that they weren't ready yet and they had jumped in too soon to interrogate them and were just about ready to see them run away in fear or shout something in protest, curl up to balls shaking in terror, or something along those lines. But to their surprised yet a small bit of relief, the orphan boys, who had been staring at the other in a silent conversation, turned back to the group as they both sighed in hopes of letting out any creeping fear that would jump out before they confessed. Slowly but surely, the truth came pouring out as they retold their tale of what they went through during their time in the orphanage. For as long as they could remember, their time there was obviously stated was anything but pleasant, but none of them knew how bad it was until they told it themselves right there. The abuse that would receive, be mocked and berated for no real reason, getting yelled at, hit and smacked even when they did nothing wrong, being told how they were nothing but parasites, getting things thrown at them, being left to starve for several days on end, sometimes even a week with only water to help them through, even then that was a rare thing in itself, being confined into a room, had no toys to play with and only being left with hand-me-down books, though most were not helpful to them other than helping the two in learning how to read, never allowed to be adopted nor even meet the other parents who would come, forced to do the dirtiest of chores, never getting a bath nor clean except by a hose, but wasn't pleasant as they were being sprayed at hard, and even getting clean itself was very rare, having no clothes to wear other than what they wore on their backs throughout that time. And when Izuku found them, being locked in a closet after getting beaten up when the caretakers were very drunk, especially if they accidentally destroyed something or hurt someone with their quirks, and more so when it would cost quite a penny to get a replacement and get help from the hospital, how their tormentors did everything they could to issue the police and the pro-heroes didn't find out what was going on behind the scenes, even the children there were being hurtful towards them, how they were all horrible towards them and more so towards Tamura. They too began to tear up as they then retold what happened days ago, the conversation they overheard, the decision that they would be killed, the plan to run away, the escape with only a few injuries, running and stowawaying on train after train to get as far as possible as they didn't know where they were going nor where they ran away from as fear clouded their minds until they found themselves in an alley as they cried until they were found by Izuku. By the end of their tale, the two orphan boys who had tears in their eyes saw that everyone was in tears like them, Inko and Izuku not doing anything to stop them from sliding down their faces as sorrow and horror were on their faces, while Best Jeanist, though you could not see most of his face because of his high jean collar, you could still see his eyes, although they were closed you could see tears visible though none have fallen, yet. Without warning the two orphans were pulling into a big, comforting, warm and tearful embrace by Inko and Izuku as the adult and her child practically leapt at them. This sudden hug from them had startled them, but soon they melted into the embrace as they hugged right back as they allowed their already flowing tears to fall more as they both softly sobbed before it turned into heavy crying as the hands gripped the fabrics tightly as they cried into Inko's shirt and a bit of Izuku's shoulder. The fact that they were there, they had not turned them away, they listened and hugged them like they might disappeared if they didn't. They cared about them, wanted to comfort them and be there for them though they haven't said a word. They could almost see them saying, everything will be okay, the past doesn't matter now, you're not alone anymore, or something along those lines from this gesture, and that they were crying and sobbing for them. It all just caused the dam they had built inside themselves to crack before it slowly started to burst as they let their tears seem to be falling unendingly. And it didn't cease even after crying out their built-up and hidden pain, fear, frustration, anger, despair, sorrow, loneliness, agony, and dread for half an hour it seemed. Enjoy. Now that we got your side of the story, Tsunagu, better known as Best Jeanist, started as everyone turned their attention to him as they wiped the tears from their eyes, and he did the same. His tone of voice remained unchanged despite the sorrow he felt towards the orphans. He held up a more than decent-sized file. I can not only report my finding here to the others, but also reveal to you all what we've uncovered. This had everyone's attention right away as they turned to face him completely, with Izuku on Inko's lap, Kurogiri on her left, and Tamura on her right. After a moment of silence, he sighed as he opened the file, reading the contents in it. Needless to say, what they were told was not something they could have imagined, and firmly left them sick to their stomachs. The true severity and horror of this mess came to light. It turned out the orphanage long before Tamura and Kurogiri were brought there, Hiroshi Orphanage, used to be a great place. Things were happier it seemed until the old caretakers mysteriously died due to food poisoning. Not long after did new ones take place. On the outside things seemed fine, but what was really happening on the inside was kept so secret that anyone who blabs about it would be killed at once regardless of who it was. Even if it was a kid. The so-called caretakers were actually criminals from China. The manipulators was what their gang name was. They were the definition of their gang name. They were the ones responsible for the previous caretakers' deaths. Each one of them, consisting of 3, had a powerful but otherwise, within the wrong hands, dangerous quirk. The leader and head of the place, Ujaku, quirk, attitude adjustment. A quirk that enabled him to change the mood or attitude of those around him through an unseenable gas he emits from his mouth when he laughs. The quirk works within a range of how big the orphanage was, which was a small but spacious second-story building. The quirk let him change the mood of those around him however he wanted. The victims would see and hear everything that their body was doing but would be unable to break free or stop themselves from doing things they normally would never do. The quirk lasts for 24 hours and the downside is that it takes a lot of iron to keep a firm grip the whole time, hence why he always had anything that had iron in it in every meal. He had to keep the effects going. Unless some kind of shock breaks his hold and frees them, the victims will be unable to fight back. The effects, if another quirk kept the effects up in some way, will also shatter the other effects on any and all inflicted victims. such as the case with the next criminal's quirk. The second guy, Yosuhare, his quirk is memory repressor. Self-explanatory really, it represses the memories of anyone he shows. He can even do it to multiple people at once. The victims would not remember what they did depending on what he represses. The drawback? He has to scream the word repression, which would send a gust of wind strong enough to blow leaves, for it to work, and it strains his throat very bad. And he can only use it every 12 hours at a time, as it also causes headaches if he uses it more than just the every 12 hours bit, and the effects on the victims vary whether they will stay repressed for days or even years or be freed from it through familiar things. Unless the user of the quirk wants it to stop, then he would have to scream. Awakening, which will send a gust of wind again freeing them. It even works through a phone or radio as long as the victims can hear it. And the victims under the repression would remember what happened when they were asleep but wouldn't when they were awake. However, if he is knocked out, put to sleep against his will by brute force so abruptly, his grip on the victims will slip and everyone under the influence would be freed instantly. Not only that, it would also shatter the hold of whatever other quirk that has affected others. Hence why he was careful in what he did to avoid his grip coming loose so suddenly. Basically, that last bit is the same, strangely, for both the first and second criminal, that is until it was revealed through DNA test that the two were actually distant cousins. Who knew? The last one, Weezjire, had a quirk that was a literal nightmare bringer, night fright. It enabled him to give anyone nightmares through a light he shines from his hand, which would put the victims to sleep if it hit them. The nightmares the victims have depends of if the user lets it happen on its own or he makes them into however he wants them to be. Usually used as a means of torture lasting between 3 to 4 minutes on the victims depending on his mental health. The drawback, however, is pretty high, as using it on more than 10 victims can cause insomnia. Using it more than 10 times while he creates nightmares for the victims will give himself nightmares until sunrise. Using it in general, no matter what he uses it over 10 times for, it will make him mentally drained. Hence why he carries a bag of drugs with him to help him stay stable mentally speaking, though it causes him to be more agitated and wrathful. Hence why he always had a cup of wine during that to soothe his anger. All of these quirks were used to plant seeds of discord in orphan children so they could bring mayhem without getting their own hands dirty, having them steal for them, sell drugs and such, while torturing their innocent minds with what they are forced to do as the perpetrators laugh and bask in the horror they spread. The children unable to break free, living with this horror that plagues them, making them miserable. When the controlled victims are around adults, they act normal and innocent, but around others their age they cause pain and malice. Doing this, they hope to bring society to its knees, causing doubt, fear and discord to the people from a young age until they reach adulthood, while they rack in the cash and pleasurement of terror they cause to others. This was what it was like for most of the victims at the orphanage. Some were kept by their side to raise as apprentices, while most were put up for adoption, while for some they were not manipulated but tortured instead for their own amusement and to let out their otherwise horrendous tempers on them, usually on those who were either quirkless or had a less than adequate quirk in some way. When they grow tiresome of them, they were killed, usually by a gun. Other times they were choked to death or killed by drug overdoses. Originally, these criminals used their manipulation on adults, but then it proved to not last long on older people, especially those who have had time to develop and grow into strong people, their quirks grown and strengthened from years of training if they were very powerful, especially those of the pro heroes. So these guys moved on to children, where their development would start at a young age, still growing, and where they would not be strong enough to fight back against them. Easier targets to infect, too weak to resist them. Where they were still young, with more fragile minds, the perfect targets to spread their seeds of despair. This ran for 6 years. When the boys came there 4 years ago, that's when trouble really began to stir for these criminals. They crooks would usually wait until the kids that arrive when they are infants grow to 3 or 4 years of age before they took action, while those that arrive older than that were tackled on the spot. But what they didn't count on was their quirks manifesting when they were both to freedom but to no avail, and add with the crimes that were committed in China such as robbery, brainwashing civilians and heroes, and illegal bombing. It's a wonder how these guys only got life in imprisonment with no parole and being put in solitary confinement instead of being put on death row, which they were very close to being put on. The crooks also used fake names to hide their identities. Ujaku is Kiyo Shimace. Yosuhara is Ryu Yusu, and Weisjire is Daisuke Soko. Daisuke was scared of being in prison, and worse at being in a small space as he was claustrophobic. Fear took over him and he managed to evade the cops long enough to commit suicide by slitting his throat. Ryu unexpectedly died after being put in prison. As it turns out, he was suffering from disease that he didn't know he was suffering from. He felt that something wasn't right but didn't tell anyone about it all because of his own pride, and the cost for going to the hospital was too great. The disease had affected his lungs, nose, and his kidneys so bad to the point where his immune system could not fight it any longer. As for Kiyo, he was the only one alive who was currently in prison, having foods where there was no iron in them while he had the quirk restraints on as no one wanted to take any chances. But then without warning, about an hour ago someone had broken into the prison and assaulted Kiyo, leaving him with a broken arm, leg, bruised stomach, and near broken neck. Nobody found out who had done it, neither did Kiyo, as he was just as confused as they were, though this left him a bit traumatized. And then, to everyone's shock, they found out during his examination at the criminal hospital that his quirk was completely gone. Upon a full-body examination, they found a punctuation on his solar plexus as if someone had injected something into his system with a needle. Kiyo did recall being hit by a dart before he felt his whole body screaming pain before he had been viciously assaulted. Whatever was in it had destroyed his quirk with no chance of getting it back. This led to another dead end. Even though the case was closed, this still left everyone with more questions than answers. That whole thing was just too gut-wrenching, crazy, insane, and stressful, not to mention horrible and horrifying, for words to describe. How could they be so cruel to those children? How could all of this have happened? This whole case, it's just... Inko tried to finish by was in tears yet again. Tamura and Kurogiri wondering how one person is able to release so much tears, such as Inko and her son, who too was crying as well, as the woman tried to wipe them away with her handkerchief with little success. And I thought we had a rough life, but we were wrong. We were not the only ones suffering from that. How could we have been so blind to not realize what was really happening under our noses? Kurogiri exclaimed in shock and guilt as he clenched his chest, shutting his eyes tight to try to stop the tears around his eyes from falling, let alone produce more. Those monsters, how could they? They made us believe that everyone was our enemy, but it was all a deep act of cruelty. How could we have been so foolish? Tamura muttered in shock, anger, and guilt as he started to scratch his neck very roughly until the pro-hero stopped him by holding his wrists, giving him time to start sobbing softly. That's too awful for words. How could anyone be so horrible? Izuku, who was in tears, sobbed too as he tried to wipe away his tears of sorrow, shock, horror, and, a rarity here, anger towards the villain's monstrous acts. He knew villains and criminals were very bad, but now he saw that they were worse than he realized. Looking up, still in tears, he tried his hardest to put on a face that showed assurance, courage, and hope as he told the gang, everyone. This got everyone's attention as they turned to face him. The past doesn't matter anymore. The case is solved. Everyone will be okay, though recovery will be tough. No one will be hurt by them anymore, and nor ever again. He paused as he walked over to the two orphan boys, putting a hand on each of their shoulders, Tamura his right with the left hand and Kurogiri his left with the right hand, giving the two a tearful smile as he continued, trying to not stutter and make his tone more assuring for them. Those guys are gone. They won't hurt you to anymore. No one will nor be made to do bad things against their wills. You're both safe, you're free. Taking another breath to calm himself, he then concluded, I know you had a bad life, a very bad one, but you can't let that stop you from having a better one. You're not alone in this, and you won't be ever again. You now have people like Mom, Best Jeanist, Kodai, Yayarozu, and others, even me, to help you. You know that, right? It seemed like crying was contagious as it caused the dam to burst inside them again for the 10th time within the past few days as their tears flowed, not able to hold back yet again as they tackled Izuku with a tearful hug, which Izuku returned as he expected them to do that. Letting the boys crying their hearts out again, smiling as his tears now being of relief fell. The same went for the boys as Inko, even Tsunaga joined it as they all sat on the floor just letting tears fall. Relief flood their system as the only sounds heard was the two orphans crying, Inko, Izuku, and the fiber master hero giving them assuring words, the orphan boys whispering thank you repeatedly, and the sound of the clock ticking in the background. After roughly 10 minutes, the boys calmed down, as they caught their breath and broke the embrace as they wiped their tear away. Tsunaga wondered how the living room wasn't flooded with tears yet as he and the others wiped their tears away too. Izuku thought it would be time to ask an important question, though it was more out of concern and curiosity for the 4-year-old, to the pro hero, Mr. Best Jeanist, what will happen now that the case is solved? This got everyone to quiet down as they all turned to the hero in concern, more of worry and fear for Tamura and Kurogiri as they hoped that they won't have to leave the Midoriyas and be put in another orphanage. They didn't want to say goodbye to the first people who were ever, with no brainwashing nor it being fake, truly nice and cared about them. Even though they haven't known each other long, the boys loved Izuku and Inko. They saw the green-haired boy as a little brother to them and his mom. After some getting used to, as their mom. This home was too wonderful to leave, first one they ever been to. They've learned so much that they couldn't back at their old home and even made some new friends and used their quirks to help people for once. Please don't make us leave. The two thought at the same time as their pleading eyes were not missed by the hero as he gave them an assuring smile. Though it was hard to tell under the tall collar, his tone however was the definition of happy good news. If you worried, please don't be. Everything is being taken care of. Everyone that was a victim of those criminals will be taken care of. And not only that but arrangements have been set up. He then turning to them completely. For you two to stay here with Inko and her son. The boys blinked a few times with widened eyes. Silence befell them as they processed what he said. Did they hear that right? The way his tone was implying, did it mean? After so long was it true? Were they? As if she knew what they were thinking, she placed a hand on each of the orphan boys' backs, getting their attention as they turned to face her as their faces seemed to show that they wanted to be hopeful, hoping this wasn't a joke. But her tearful but happy, and I mean very happy, smile quails their doubt and uncertainty. Izuku looking to his mother with hope, as she spoke the very words they never thought anyone would say to them, but, just like with Izuku, hoped and longed to hear them, those words full of genuine honesty and love. I am adopting you too. For now you two will be a part of our family. Yet another barrier inside them broke as new tears fell. Not believing that this was happening after all this time, having given up all hope that no one would do what they longed and hoped for anyone to do for them, this kind woman full of love and care, concern for their welfare as well as her sons, who took them in, clothed them, feed them, cleaned them and dressed their wounds, had done it. Adopting them. Then this meant that they would have Midoriya as their new last names, that they would be the adopted sons of Inko Midoriya and the older brother of Izuku Midoriya. This place would be their home from now on. They could now and finally start fresh and live better lives. Their mouths quivered as they tried to form smiles on their faces, their face showered with relief, new hope, and overwhelming joy. A knowing look crossed her face as she opened her arms as, like a cue, the two boys and even Izuku jumped into her arms as she held them close in a hug as she rested her head between each of theirs as Tamura and Kurogiri cried again, this time with joy. While Izuku was beaming with joy and relief as of this time there were only a few tears hanging around his eyes. That's right. For now on you two will grow up alongside my son, living a much more happier life than the one you had before, as my sons and as Izuku's older brothers. No one will take you both away from us. This is your home now. And I promise that I will do everything I can to provide all that you need, including love. Inko told them as she nuzzles their heads with hers. Thank you. Thank you so much. The two boys exclaimed in gratitude repeatedly as they cried into her chest. I'm so happy you both can stay. Izuku sighed in bliss and relief. Triplets. After another crying session, and some more talking about getting the adoption papers and talking about getting the boys to be seen by a doctor to ensure that they were doing fine, that they were not ill, and maybe even find out who their previous families were by a DNA test and figure out why they were abandoned in the first place. And Best Jeanist wanted to straighten the boys' hairs and smooth it down, Tamura's hair being the easiest to comb it smooth and he seemed to like really it. Kurogiri's was just as easy though he was a bit confused by this. And as for Izuku, his proved to be the most difficult even though the tangles were able to be combed out as his unruly curly hair just refused to be combed and straighten out, let alone stay down so much that it actually broke one of his combs he had, which surprised them though. He now understand what Inko meant by how hard it was to do Izuku's hair as he chuckled. The pro-hero left to deliver the last bit of the info he got to the police and those who helped solve the case so it can be put to bed completely. To celebrate, the newly grown family went to watch the movie that they were planning on watching, ordered a pizza too as joy was in their hearts. Later, after all of that, everyone got their baths done and went to bed with smiles on their faces. Triplets, da! Exclaimed Tamura as he woke up from the nightmare he had, sweat coming down his face as he panted, sitting up slowly as he looked around him. He realized that he was in Izuku's room, since there was no guest room and he and Kurogiri don't have their own rooms, yet they had to stay there until they can clear the boxes of stuff from one of the storage rooms and make arrangements so that it would be a suitable room for 2 growing boys. Izuku and Kurogiri were deep in their sleep. Tamura sighed as he realized that he was awake. He only had a nightmare. But even so, it still frightened and bothered him as he couldn't ignore it no matter how much he tried to not think about it. Wiping the sweat from his face, he was trying to think of how to deal with this as he didn't want to disturb his brother's sleep. Wow, didn't think I would be calling them my actual brothers so soon, but I'm glad that I can call them that now. He thought to himself, and he didn't feel alright going back to sleep right now. Wait, what if I? Tamura thought to himself as he recalled something he saw on the movie he saw with his new family, where the mother was comforting his daughter after escaping a forest fire thanks to the Wild Pussycats gang. Parents comfort their children when they are upset and in distress, don't they? Having decided, though a bit hesitant to disturbing her, but remembered that she said that if anything was bothering him or the others, just come to her even if it was the middle of the night, Tamura got up from the sleeping bag and tiptoed out of the bedroom to go to Mrs. Mido his mom's room. I guess it's going to take a while to get used to calling Izuku's mom my mom, he thought as closed the door quietly behind him. It was very dark in the house, but thankfully there was a light coming from Inko's room as the door was a bit ajar, so he followed it until he reached it. Peeking in, he saw her just getting off the phone with a smile on her face. Now being a mother, she knew that sense that she felt like a small pair of eyes was watching her, coming from a child, like when Izuku had a nightmare or needed her help in something. Turning to the source, she was a bit surprised to see Tamura peeking from behind the door as he flinched a bit, but thankfully didn't run away. Tamura, why are you still up? Is something wrong? She asked him. He didn't respond right away, but he felt a bit conflicted. Should he tell her or will it be bothersome to her? His face was sweaty, he had a bit of fear on his face. He came to her for a reason. Instantly she knew what it was. He must have had a nightmare. It's strange that he nor Kurogiri didn't have one until now since we met them, but that doesn't matter right now. He needs help. He needs me, Inko thought to herself as she gave him a soft smile and coaxed him to come closer as she knelt down to her knees with open arms. He knew the cue. He tried to not let hesitation get in the way, as he came in slowly until he was in front of her as she enveloped him in a hug as he returned it as she rubbed his back. His breathing began to get softer as he started to calm down. Just being in her arms seemed to help him to relax. Like every parent, from his observation, she had that special touch that seemed to calm the storm he had brewing in him. He only had known her for a few days, but it seemed like this was natural. Still, he wasn't complaining. He needed this. I had a nightmare, he said as he laid his head on her chest, now able to speak without too fear. I dreamt that I woke up back at the orphanage with Kurogiri, that what happened the last few days were nothing but a dream too good to be true. Those crooks came in like they usually do every morning, but this time it was different. One of them carrying a lighter, and the looks on their faces were menacing. They all said die, before the lighter was lit in tosses until it hit the ground. The fire spread fast and we had no way to escape. We were trapped. Tamura felt tears welling up in his eyes, but he didn't let that stop him from talking. We could hear everyone laughing at us, telling us to die, to burn away, and that we were never meant to exist. The fire seemed to roar and lunged at us. As soon as it was about to ensnare us, that was when I woke up. Tamura could feel Inko hugging him closer to her as he sighed, burying his face in her chest as he let the tears fall. Though he didn't cry, he just let the tear fall. He felt her nuzzle her cheek against his head as she whispered comforting words to him. Had Inko not been holding him, he would have collapsed on his knees by now. Soon enough he felt 2 more smaller sets of arms wrapped around him and his mother as Tamura looked up, seeing Izuku and Kurogiri were there hugging them. Why were they up? He wondered. Had woken them up without realizing it? He scolded himself internally. yet on their faces they showed assurance, telling him without words that things will be okay. Upon seeing this, he relaxed. That's right. Things will be okay because he and Kurogiri were here and not at the awful place and not alone. They had a family, a real family to help them no matter what the situation is. Everything will be all right. The four stayed like that for a while until Tamura's tears ran dry. It was decided that for the night the boys would sleep with her, to ensure that no more nightmares came. As they all got into bed under the covers, cuddling close to her after she turned off the lights and held them close, Izuku then asked her, "Mom, can you sing that lullaby you always sang to me?" Tamura and Kurogiri told me that they never had a lullaby sung to them before, so maybe yours will help. Inko nodded as she asked the other two boys, her two new oldest sons, if they wanted to hear it, which they nodded without a word. And thus, the lullaby began as she sang. "Here comes trouble. No mistaking. I know you anywhere. I could sail to the ends of the ocean and find you waiting there. I've been searching and searching, near and far, searching and searching. And there you are. Our dreams will soar like stars." Her voice was soft and gentle, yet it was beautiful. Leaning closer to her, Tamura had his head on her shoulder, Kurogiri had his on her chest, and Izuku had his on where her heart was. "I choose you. I choose you. What else can I do? We're just too good together to part. What we've shared from the start feels like one beating heart. I choose you. I choose you. Hello, stranger. Don't I know you? Nice to see you, my friend. Did we just scale the top of a mountain and fly back home again? I've been looking and looking, high and low, looking and looking. And what did you know? Just like long ago. I choose you. I choose you. What else can I do? We're just too good together to part. What we've shaped from the start feels like one beating heart. I choose you. I choose you." The boys' eyelids felt droopy as they started nodding off, sleep slowly welcoming them as Inko sang the rest of the song. "I choose you. I choose you. Onto journeys anew, with the wonderful friends that I found. As the planet spins round, we're eternally bound. I choose you. I choose you." And with that they were out like a light, and soon with a soft smile, so was she. Sleeping in bliss, little did any of them know of what was to come in the future, as this was only just the beginning. "Good morning, class." The teacher, who was female with the sorta short bob brown haircut, pale skin, brown eyes, wearing a pink apron on top of a yellow sweater, blue jeans and black flats, greeted her students, who were all children, preschool age, with a smile. "Good morning, Miss Yu," the children greeted her back. "Now today class is going to be a bit different because we have some new faces joining us. They're rather shy, so be nice to them and help them to get situated in class, okay?" She told them before she turned to the door as she called out, "Izuku, you can bring them in now." The classroom door opened as Izuku came in, as he brought his brothers in, who were wearing their new preschool uniforms. A smile was on his face while shy ones were on the boys. Still can't fathom all that happened within 1 week. They thought the process would take longer after that groundbreaking night and all that happened, but thanks to Uncle Tsunagu, as best Genus told them to call him that, as he was like a brother to Inko, much to Izuku's shock and excitement and the former orphan boy's surprise, the process took a few short days, thus leading to the Midoriya family getting bigger and becoming a happier one at that. During that time, Inko took her new eldest sons to the hospital with Izuku, as she didn't want to leave him home alone, and he wanted to give the boys support as they've never been to the hospital and were nervous about it, while she spoke to Izuku's school so that his brothers can attend there and get a good education, which the meeting would be held the day after the hospital trip. With Inko and Izuku there, it made them feel less nervous. Upon examination, after some tests and doing a blood test to find out more about their family line, hopefully, the doctor revealed that while neither of them had a dangerous disease nor bad organs nor injuries so bad they needed surgery or a cast, which was relieving, though they changed their bandages, which they revealed that they would be okay after a healing session with one of the nurses, even though scars will remain. The boys were suffering from starvation, as indicated from their bones showing through their skin, still though looked a little better thanks to Inko's cooking, lack of sleep, from some bags still visible around their eyes, and obviously mental trauma from what they had to endure in the past. And for Tamura, he obviously had very dry skin that was quite concerning, worse than the mild dryness Kurogiri had, especially around the face, despite it not looking as bad as days ago. The boys would be coming in for a checkup for their physical health and child psychological therapy for mental health twice a week for the next few months or so, but were deemed okay to go to school based on their good interaction with the kids in the waiting room, though needed a bit more time to not be too shy and make sure the teachers and principal knew what was going on in case something happened. Inko was given a list of what food groups they should have each day to get some meat and muscle back on their bones. The boys also got a special face care lotion to help make the bags non-visible, heal the skin, and to get rid of the dryness from their faces until their bodies could produce the natural oils on their own again. With that done, everyone was about to go home, content that it all went very well. Before the Midoriyas left, they were called by the nurse to get the results of the blood test she got, much to their surprise as it came sooner than they hoped. The nurse who called for them who did the test was a prodigy at blood testing and genealogy, so they got their results quicker than expected. They were brought to a private room where Tamura was immediately scooped into the arms of a nurse, the one who did the blood test. As said nurse was in uniform, female, had tan skin, orange hair in a bun with red eyes, and a snail shell pendant around her neck as she cried so hard, sobbing, "It's you. I never thought I'd see you again. You're okay." She said those and more once or twice, much to the surprise and total confusion of the gang, especially to Tamura, as was frozen both from sudden being pulled into a hug of a woman he certainly has never met before, yet she knew him, and by the sheer confusion of trying to figure out what was going on. Though the other female nurse that brought them there seemed to know, was she held a relieved yet saddened look on her face. After she stopped crying and put Tamura back down, who went to stand by his mom, she immediately apologized after catching her breath. She then introduced herself, June Bloodstone, who was half American and half Japanese, and then she revealed to them some shocking news, more to add to their growing list of shocking things to be revealed this week. She was the best friend / older sister figure of Tamura's mother. His real mother ran Sakura / Shimura. If this didn't shock them all, Tamura especially, even after showing them photographic evidence, they didn't know what would. The photo she showed of her, a man he didn't recognize, and a woman who had beautiful fair light tan skin, ocean blue eyes, long and beautiful flowing hair that was the exact same color as Tamura's, all of them were wearing cafe uniforms. She revealed to them that she had been Rant's best friend since elementary. Rand saved her from getting run over by a truck, and they've been inseparable since then, growing up as sisters to the other. As it was revealed that she was quirkless, yet it didn't stop her from living her life despite the hardships she faced, and more so since she was an orphan after her parents died in a freak accident on a train going to Hosu. They overcame trials, and more so after they met the man who would become her husband, Hiragana Shimura, who was also an orphan because his mother put him in foster care fearing that he would be in danger. By what? No one knew. Later it was revealed that she was murdered brutally a year after being put in foster care by her. No one ever found out who did it and why. Hiragana and Ran had been together since then. They dated for years until he proposed to her, which she accepted, on the night of a new moon at the movie theater in Kamino Ward. They were happy together more than ever after the wedding. His father, the man with light tan skin, short shaggy black hair and scarlet red eyes in the photo with the two ladies, was a funny guy with a gentle heart, despite having a bad temper which only Ran and June could quail. He worked hard and was a jokester you want to hang around with to lighten up your day. His mother was beautiful inside and out, very kind, caring, sweet, thoughtful and caring, a hard worker who never let anyone have the satisfaction of seeing her cry nor react badly, who kept smiling, assuring everyone that things were okay. Sometimes she was clumsy, but never let that get in the way of her job, nor let her quirklessness rob her of living a happy life. She was someone who had a mother and sisterly personality around others, yet she forgave willingly to those who did harm to her and others, which surprised them. Though she was not a daisy to push over, as she knew when to be serious and put her foot down. A wonderful woman to be around. Together they were all a big happy family. If only it could have stayed like that, but it was not to be. When the news came up that Ran was pregnant, the couple were overjoyed knowing that they were going to have a baby. But then concerning news popped up that Ran's body, due to her very thin structure and the fact that his spleen was gone due to having it gotten surgically removed after it got punctured in an accident during a concert a while back before the marriage, may not be able to withstand the pain and labor she would go through and be more exposed to illnesses. Giving birth to the baby would most likely kill her, or the baby, or both, as the doctor suggested that she gave up the baby. But she flat out refused, ranting and pointing out that abortion was murder. She would never do that, not to her baby. Killing the baby before it was born was not right, sickening, horrible, and wrong. She would never forgive herself if she did that to an unborn child, especially hers. She hated abortion more than anyone they knew. She proclaimed that she would make sure to be careful, take care of herself, eat right, everything so that her child would be born healthy and happy and that she would make it through. Things got harder after that despite all the help and support she got from June herself, her husband and June's family. Work at the cafe in Osaka was strenuous on Ran as she showed more signs of her pregnancy months after that appointment. Intense pain, vomiting in the morning and afternoon and night, catching a cold or fever here and there. Going to the doctor frequently every Monday, Wednesday and Friday for a checkup on her condition, still refusing to get an abortion. Sometimes she could faint without warning and her mood swings were not helpful. Her husband tried his hardest to support his wife and their family. When she smiled it always calmed him down, though it didn't soothe his worries of her entirely, nor of the fact that 1. She could not have certain medicines, let alone stronger doses of what she was prescribed, for her condition due to the high chances, with her weak immune systems, it could poison the unborn child, or cause something to got wrong during development, deformities or seriously conditions after birth, or kill it. 2. Going to the hospital more often was crunching their rather tight budget even though June's family helped a lot, especially after June resigned from her cafe job not long after Ran for maternity leave so she can work at the hospital which she had skills under her belt in medicine, blood test and first aid from college to earn more money. And more experience so she could help tend to Ran so she and her husband would not need to go to the hospital as often. It sometimes wasn't enough. 3. His wife being more exposed to sicknesses and diseases was stressful. And 4. The chance of losing her would destroy him. Though he tried to stay positive and be there for his wife as he took on more jobs to pay the bills and get what she needed. As long as she was there, he would make it. He would love her no matter what, and hope it would turn out okay. When the ultrasound came, they learned that they would be having a son. Immediately Ran knew what she would name her son. Tamura right there learned that his real name was Tenko, which seemed more pleasant and welcoming than Tamura as he always hated the name he was forced to have for 4 years of his young life. Though he never got mad nor sad when his family called him that, though it stings still. Anyways, on the day he was born, thankfully born healthy, things took a turn for the worse. The doctor's first estimation was right, there was so much blood lost from that delivery, so much strain from it, and after they had to cut open her stomach to get him out, it was all too much for her to bear. They did everything they could to save her, but there was nothing they could do despite their best efforts. His mother died 10 minutes after he was brought into the world, though she did get to hold him and speak to her friend and husband one more time. The sound of the flat line on the heart monitor was ominous and dreadful to them. Her husband cried mournfully over her death, as did June herself as she tended to Tenko who cried, after if he felt his connection with his mother vanished, scaring him. His cries for his mother was in vain. The doctors gave Hiragana their condolences and allowed him to stay the night along with his son until morning, which he numbly accepted. For a brief moment, the nurse of the deceased friend saw deep brewing anger in his eyes, concerning her though he waved her off saying his was fine. But obviously he wasn't. Around midnight a loud yelling scream of rage was heard throughout the hospital, waking everyone up in fright. It belonged to Hiragana. The doctors went to check on him, only to find their guest room was totally thrashed as he and his newborn son were gone. And no one saw them again. June was worried out of her own mind, almost having a heart attack. She searched everywhere but nothing turned up, tried to call him but it seemed like he had cut his connection to her and her family. Filing a missing persons report but came back fruitless after several years. She did everything she could but it was not enough. Losing her best friends, she siblings, and her new nephew broke her heart. She kept going with her life despite that but refused to give up finding Hiragana and Tenko. Seeing Tenko here alive and well for the most part made her relieved and happy, but hearing that his father abandoned him, evening changing his disowned son's name to cut off all ties to him, made her upset and sad. She blamed herself for not trying harder to help them. She regret not taking them under her wings completely despite them wanting to stay in their home until things settled down. She felt like a failure. But Tomoe, Tenko, didn't blame her. She didn't know, she did her best. He could not hate her, not after all she did for his mother when she was alive, and helping his father, despite some destine he has for him, through all of it. He could see that his family meant so much to her. How could he hate her after all she did for them, for him? The moment he forgave her made her happy as she pulled Tenko into another hug, which this time he didn't freeze up in as he returned it. The others joined in too as they also had tears in their eyes. After a while, their tears dried up and spent, they moved on with their evaluation. Tenko was astonishingly related to a pro-hero from the earliest age of heroes, Nana Shimura. From his father's side of the family, the Gold Heart heroine, Sora, who was well known, beloved and a great hero. She had a strong sense of justice and always smiled, which gave people hope, caring, wise, motherly too. Had she not been murdered after giving up her son, she would have been a wonderful grandmother. After that there wasn't anyone else in Tenko's family alive besides his father, both who was not qualified to be one after disowning his newborn son and abandoning him, and his whereabouts were still unknown. Not that Tenko cared, as he was happy to have a new family and a new life. Though he wanted to be called by his real name, have his name be Tenko Shimura Midoriya, because his first name came from his mother, and Shimura, not because of his father, but because of his grandmother. Everyone couldn't agree more on that. And lastly, Kurogiri is left. While his family was dead, as they had been killed months after he was born and left at the orphanage, not knowing what was going to happen to their only son. Before that, the two were apparently pro-heroes like Tenko's grandma, Kahaku, and Ayumi Fujiwara, the duo, Windbreaker and Greystream. A wind quirk and a warping quirk were rare, so it wasn't hard to narrow down the search results. For the boys' parents, both of them were polite, humble, kind, determined, and heroic. They traveled around Japan, never staying for more than a month or less in a city or town or any of that due to their missions from their jobs and adventurous personalities. No one knew what happened to them that led to their untimely demise. They were found killed brutally like Nana. The only difference was that they were killed at Kamino Ward with nothing but their severed limbs laying at the scene, while Nana was killed on an island far from this city and no traces of her body was found, as only her blood and parts of her costume were the only things present. Just like Tenko, Kurogiri was happy to know he was related to pro-heroes. He wanted to, in honor of his parents, have his name be Kurogiri Fujiwara Midoriya. Again, everyone couldn't agree more. After paperwork was done, they all left for home. After paperwork for adoption was completed, things at home were great. The rest their days, besides doing the checkups, therapy and registration for school, were blissful. Back to the present as school break ended, Tenko and Kurogiri stood in front of the class as they introduced themselves. "Go on, boys, please introduce yourselves to everyone," the teacher encouraged them. Turning to Izuku, he gave them a smile and a nod before the two turned back to the class. "My name is Tenko Shimura Midoriya." Tenko went first. "And I'm Kurogiri Fujiwara Midoriya." Kurogiri went next before the two said at the same time. "We're Izuku's new big brothers. Nice to meet all of you. We hope to become good friends with you all." Triplets. "We're home," the trio exclaimed with smiles as they came through the door of their house. Inko, who was drying her hands from doing the dishes, came out to greet her sons as she smiled. "Hello, boys. How was your day?" "It was great," the boys exclaimed animatedly. Kurogiri, Tenko, and Izuku ate their snacks at the table as they told their mom about their day as she listened. As soon as the two slightly older boys introduced themselves, their new class was shocked and excited that Izuku got new brothers, and that they got their quirks earlier than most of the class did. While they showed a demonstration of their quirks, they told them that they were given strict orders to not use them unless they really needed to, like for Tenko to use it to turn the garbage to ashes, making trash duty easier, or say if a branch fell on someone and he needed to use his quirk to get it off of those trapped by it, preventing them from further injury from it if it were moved incorrectly, and for Kurogiri to use his quirk if his class needed to get inside faster than going through the door due to the rain, or suspicious people came that may do them harm, and use his quirk to get him and his brother to school and back if neither their mom or Aunt Mitsuki and Uncle Masaru could not do that due to work or something. The class understood thankfully, though some were disappointed or annoyed. Soon the rest of the day went off without a hitch. They played, learned how to write and draw, played tag and soccer, had tasty snacks, and everyone was nice. Even though Bakugo was still with his usual attitude, being explosive as his quirk and his posy hanging with him that were more like followers than friends. Several of the kids had their quirks appear that day, which was exciting. After the day was over, on the way home, Aunt Mitsuki told the boys some jokes that made them laugh so hard they started to cry in laughter. Inko still remembered when she introduced her childhood friend, Mitsuki Bakugo, and her husband and their son, who met them beforehand, to her new eldest sons. It was a mixed reaction for the adults. They were happy for them but at the same time worried when they saw the boys' condition. When Inko told them about their origin and what was behind it, after getting the boys' consent beforehand to tell, needless to say Mitsuki was angry beyond reason and went ballistic while her horrified husband did his hardest to calm her down. Though who can blame her for reacting like this? Soon afterward, after it took roughly half an hour or so calm down, she became a second protective mom/aunt to Tenko and Kurogiri as she was to Izuku, and her husband, Masaru, became a father figure/uncle for the boys as he was to Izuku. Despite the bumps that week, they doing pretty well. Though as the boys chat, Inko had something on her mind, one that bothered a lot. It was concerning because it involved Izuku,